Chapter 573. Pollsmoor Prison. On this day, the prison cart escorting the prisoners arrived again. Just like before, the prisoners inside the barbed wire were all looking forward to the arrival of the newcomers, waiting for the show to begin. This time, there were two prisoners who came down from the cart. One was a middle-aged man in his 40s who looked very timid. His eyes were fixed on the ground and he didn't dare look around. The other person, however, piqued the curiosity of all the prisoners. From his skin color and appearance, it could be seen that he was Asian. He was about 1.8 meters tall, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, and his gaze was very spirited. Unlike the old man, his gaze constantly swept across the prisoners inside the barbed wire on both sides. Even when he met those vicious gazes, he didn't avoid them at all, and his entire body exuded confidence. After confirming the two's identities, the prison guard brought them to the office and began the registration process. But during the registration, what made the prison guard curious was that one of them was actually a stowaway. As for where he came from, he didn't say, but the crimes he committed were very ridiculous. He actually used a toy gun to rob a bank, and he even succeeded. What made the prison guard even more speechless was that after the robbery, this guy took the huge sum of money and sat in front of the bank smoking, as if he wanted to be caught. After he was caught, this guy's attitude became even more inexplicable. No matter how they asked, he wouldn't say anything. Left with no choice, the police could only conduct a psychiatric evaluation, but the conclusion was that he was completely normal and had no mental problems. Finally, according to the Republic of South Africa's laws, because his circumstances were very bad and he was extremely uncooperative, he was sentenced to Pollsmoor Prison. From the prison guard's point of view, this guy called Mu Zhiguang was really showing off. This criminal file was really showing off to the point of numbness in the prison guard's scalp. Looking at this guy, he was still full of confidence even in prison. It was enough to make the prison guard speechless. Really showing off. According to the procedure, after a body check and meeting with the warden, the two newcomers were taken away and sent to the restricted areas of A and C. Mu Zhiguang was assigned to C, which was separated from B by a barbed wire fence. There were also two gangs in Area C, the Snake Gang and the Eagle Gang. But recently, these two originally opposing gangs united for the first time in history. The reason was that B, which was already under Gangda's control. Faced with Gangda's suppression, they had no choice but to cooperate. Seeing Mu Zhiguang enter the field, the prisoners who were exercising immediately turned to look at him. When a newcomer arrived, there was naturally a need to set up rules to let the newcomer understand some simple principles. They gathered together and walked towards Mu Zhiguang. This time, there weren't many twists and turns. They just wanted to beat up the rookie. The prison guard stood behind the iron gate, turning a blind eye to all of this. At this moment, Mu Zhiguang smiled when he saw the aggressive crowd. He turned his head and looked in the direction of Zone B. Then, he walked toward the crowd in front of him and took the initiative to attack. Unlike Gangda back then, Mu Zhiguang's attacks were not as vicious, but every move he made was extremely effective, quickly subduing his enemies. Basically, no one present could withstand a single blow from him. At this moment, Mu Zhiguang was performing the art of grappling, ultimate version, that Lu Wu had implanted in him, copied from a Beiki expert. Mu Zhiguang was always able to defeat his enemies with one strike by exploiting the weaknesses of the human body's joints, acupuncture points, and vital parts. In a short period of time, he had defeated more than 10 people. At this moment, the prisoners in Zone C were also dumbfounded. When Gangda appeared in Zone B, it was already unbelievable. Now, there was another one, and he didn't seem to be any weaker than Gangda. However, facing a newcomer, these old men with a sense of superiority were unwilling to bow their heads. They immediately swarmed forward. Although Mu Zhiguang's soul power was drained by Lu Wu, he still retained his fighting skills. Facing the prisoner's fierce attack, he did not panic at all. he calmly fought back, and at the same time, he dodged to prevent himself from being pushed to the ground. Even though he had the physique of a human body's limit, Mu Zhiguang knew that if he was pushed to the ground by so many prisoners, it would be difficult for him to get up again. Relying on his superior skills and physique, Mu Zhiguang fought against 50 people alone. Apart from the prisoners who did not join gangs and were bullied all day long, the gang members who had gathered were all knocked to the ground in a short period of time. However, unlike Gangda, Mu Zhiguang did not chase after all of them after defeating them. Instead, he smiled and said, "Let's have a discussion. How about I be the boss of Zone C?" Lying on the ground, the prisoners who were wailing because their weak points were hit were dumbfounded when they heard this. This scene was so familiar. Just a while ago, they had witnessed the same situation in Area B next door. At that time, they treated it as a joke, and they could not help but laugh at it. They did not expect to be defeated in the same place. However, the people here were all villains. How could they surrender so easily? Even if they could not win, they had to hold on. However, unlike Gangda, Mu Zhiguang did not kill them to set an example to others to establish his authority. Instead, he turned around and found a place to sit down. He looked at them lying on the ground with a smile on his face. The prisoners were dumbfounded. They had no idea what Mu Zhiguang was going to do. However, Mu Zhiguang was very clear about what he was going to do. He was going to kill Gangda and complete Lu Wu's task. At the same time, he was going to set up a trap for the heavenly mystic deity behind the scenes. It did not matter to him whether he wanted to be the boss or not. However, for the next few days, no one in Zone C dared to provoke Mu Zhiguang. After that fight, Mu Zhiguang had made his name known. But soon, trouble came knocking on his door. This trouble was not directed at Mu Zhiguang, but the entire Zone C. During lunch in the cafeteria, the prisoners in Zone A and B took the initiative to provoke Gangda. There was only one goal: to make everyone in Zone C recognize Gangda as their boss. Of course, the prisoners in Zone C were not happy about this. Thus, two groups of people started fighting during lunchtime. Food flew everywhere, and the ground was filled with scuffling figures. After this fight, Zone A and Zone B did not gain much of an advantage. Although Zone C was weaker than the combined forces of Zone A and B, Mu Zhiguang made his move in the end. However, in the end, Mu Zhiguang made his move and successfully defeated the prisoners in Area A and B before the prison emergency squad arrived. However, after this, the two bosses in Zone C looked very worried. Since Gangda had been locked up in the detention room for the past few days, he did not participate in this group fight. Therefore, they were very worried about how Gangda would deal with them when he came out. The prisoners in Zone C were still very afraid of Gangda, who could single-handedly defeat Zone B and make the prisoners in Zone A submit in a short period of time. Therefore, they were worried that when that madman Gangda came out, he would personally lead the prisoners in Zone A and B to beat them up. At this moment, they thought of Mu Zhiguang. It seemed that in the entire Zone C, only Mu Zhiguang had the power to fight against Gangda. After some hesitation and mental struggle, the two bosses in Zone C found Mu Zhiguang, hoping that he would be the boss of Zone C and lead his brothers to fight against Gangda. In this prison where they had lost their freedom, for these bosses, face was actually very important. Although they would all recognize someone else as their boss, at the very least, Mu Zhiguang was one of them in Zone C. This was not a shameful thing to say. Mu Zhiguang did not refuse and agreed decisively. Because he only had one goal, and that was to wait for Gangda to come out of the detention room and then punish him. The days passed one by one. While waiting, the vicious Gangda was finally released from the confinement room. As usual, the first thing Gangda did when he came out was to stir up trouble. It was still lunchtime, and after eating a few mouthfuls of food, Gangda suddenly stood up. Seeing this, the two prison guards already knew what was going to happen. Their hands were already on the alarm, ready to press it at any time. Seeing Gangda stand up, The lackeys around him also stood up and followed Gangda step by step towards the prisoners who were eating in Zone C. Seeing this, Mu Zhiguang smiled. After some thought, he also stood up. Seeing their boss stand up, although the prisoners in Zone C were timid, they still mustered up their courage to fight. At this moment, Gangda walked in front of Mu Zhiguang and looked at him with indifferent eyes. "I heard that the boss of Zone C has changed. Is it you?" Mu Zhiguang nodded nonchalantly. "Is there a problem? Recognize me as your boss and listen to me in the future. Is there a problem?" Gangda asked in a low voice. "How about this, you fight me. If you can beat me, I'll listen to you." Mu Zhiguang seemed very relaxed and not nervous at all. Hearing Mu Zhiguang's answer, Gangda was very surprised. However, he had absolute confidence in such a challenge, so he nodded. The scene of the two dueling instantly attracted the attention of all the prisoners in the cafeteria. The two bosses in Zone B who had followed Gangda since the beginning walked towards the prison guards and told them about the duel. They also expressed that they didn't want to press the alarm and that it was just a duel. Nothing would happen. These two prison guards usually received a lot of benefit. Hearing that it was not a group fight and only a duel, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. Soon, the prisoners formed a large circle, and Mu Zhiguang and Gangda stood in the circle. It was not common for a duel to happen in a prison. Instead, the chances of a group fight were higher, so the surrounding prisoners all seemed a little excited. Some of the prisoners even raised their bowls and chopsticks and began to beat rhythmically. A duel in a prison seemed to be filled with a sense of ceremony, but it also seemed simple and crude. Defeating the opponent with brute force was enough, and there were no rules at the same time. Even things like chairs that were randomly grabbed during the fight could be used as weapons as long as they could knock the opponent down. "Come, I'll let you attack first," Gangda sneered and provoked. Hearing this, Mu Zhiguang did not act humble. He decisively took a step forward and punched straight at Gangda's face. The moment the wind from the punch came, Gangda understood that the person in front of him was not easy to deal with. He immediately raised his hand to block. Seeing this, Mu Zhiguang took a step forward with his right foot and added some force to the punch. It smashed into Gangda's elbow and pushed him back a few steps. At this moment, Gangda's expression froze. He was shocked by Mu Zhiguang's strength. But before he could recover, Mu Zhiguang's attacks came at him continuously. The moment they clashed, Gangda fell into a passive position. The prisoners around him were all dumbfounded. In reality, they all thought that Gangda would win. Some of them even secretly opened a betting stand and bet on their private stash of tobacco. They did not expect Mu Zhiguang's strength to exceed their imaginations. Bang! With a dull sound, Gangda's chest was punched. He fell back and crashed into the dining table. "What move?" Gangda, who was slowly crawling up from the ground, asked with a dark expression. "Divide, fix, inch, flood fist." Mu Zhiguang smiled. Again. This time, Gangda took the initiative to pounce on Mu Zhiguang. But in the face of Mu Zhiguang's crushing technique, Gangda's brute strength was very strenuous. While the two of them were exchanging blows, two pairs of eyes were watching them from the unseen world. One was naturally Lu Wu, observing through the artifact without leaving a trace. The other was the heavenly mystic deity. Seeing Gangda being restrained, the heavenly mystic deity in the Heavenly Strategies Bureau in the heaven frowned and kept glancing at Mu Zhiguang. But after careful inspection, he realized that there was not a trace of spiritual power in Mu Zhiguang's body. He could conclude that Mu Zhiguang was just an ordinary physical cultivator in reality. This made the heavenly mystic deity extremely frustrated. He had put Gangda in an important position and was prepared to slowly cultivate him into an important pawn in the human world. He did not expect to be restrained in this prison. But due to the restrictions of the Three Realms Treaty, as an enlightened master, he could not descend to the human world. Previously, He could only put the modified Yu Yao's soul into Gangda's body through a method of reincarnation. He did not descend to the human world himself. At this moment, he was extremely anxious. Lu Wu and Lil Bailey were very happy. They had even set up a trap for this deity. Chapter 574. Heaven Realm, Heavenly Strategies Bureau. It was a very special department in the Heaven Realm. It was established after the Great War of the Three Realms with the purpose of inspecting the underworld and the human world to prevent any crisis. Although the Heaven Realm was already the strongest force in the Three Realms, they were still worried about the rise of the two realms below. The duty of the Heavenly Strategies Bureau was to eliminate all signs of crisis and control the direction of the situation while secretly inspecting. The Heavenly Mystic Deity King was also known as the Honorable Heavenly Strategies, the highest leader of the Heavenly Strategies Bureau. After being granted amnesty by the Immortal Emperor, he had been secretly plotting many plans. Since the human world was already in the degenerate age, there was no source of spiritual energy, so his focus was basically on the underworld. He constantly investigated for news, looking for the remnants of the heaven-defying alliance, and curbing the development of the underworld forces. Sangshu was just a pawn in his plan. After many investigations, the Heavenly Mystic Deity King realized that the underworld no longer had the strong desire for revenge like when the heaven-defying alliance was in the past. The forces of the underworld were attacking each other and plundering resources, which was no longer a problem. Therefore, the Heavenly Mystic Deity King felt that the underworld had no hope of rising again, so he kicked Sangshu away and handed the task of inspecting the underworld to the members of the Heavenly Strategies Bureau. But recently, the underworld was no longer peaceful. After Bei Ming killed a god, Luo Xiu killed another one. What surprised him even more was the appearance of the Ice Ghost Legion from the old era of the heaven-defying alliance. All of this gave him a bad feeling. Therefore, he began to inspect the situation of the underworld, focusing most of his attention on Beiki. This was because many recent problems revolved around the headquarters of the heaven-defying alliance, Beiki. However, he did not find any problems in Beiki during the inspection. Although there were many new forces, it was normal. Moreover, the strongest of these forces had not even reached the Ghost Emperor level, let alone establishing an organization like the Heaven-Defying Alliance. Therefore, he was relieved once again. He thought that all the crisis came from the remnants of the Heaven-Defying Alliance, so it was not a problem. As long as these remnants were all wiped out, the underworld would still be the one that he could rest assured of. But soon, the Heavenly Mystic Deity King discovered another big problem. That was the problem of the gods being robbed of their power, and the source could not be found at all, even if the Immortal Emperor was involved. This gave the Heavenly Mystic Immortal Lord a bad feeling. Thus, he was prepared to set up a puppet in the human world, a chess piece that would help him find out information and eliminate the danger. The most important thing was to find the remnant body of the deity, whose power had been plundered and left in the human world. Logically speaking, everything was flawless. After all, he had never descended to the lower realm, so he did not break the rules. His actions could be said to be very secretive, but who would have thought that the problem would arise just like that? His chess piece, Gangda, had actually encountered a human martial arts cultivator, or in other words, a physical cultivator. What made him feel even more aggrieved was that the Gundam he created was no match for him. This was not to say that Gangda's body was not weaker than his opponent's. Instead, it was the absolute difference in combat technique. The Heavenly Mystic Immortal Lord felt rather anxious as he watched Gangda being continuously knocked down. It was because Gangda was placed in an important position. He was an important link in the human world, so he couldn't afford to lose him. However, Gangda's opponent was just a normal person, not a member of the underworld at all. He had no reason to descend to the mortal realm to help. But soon, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Because Mu Zhiguang was obviously trying to kill him. Relying on his powerful martial arts techniques, he continuously attacked Gangda's head, neck, and other vital points. At this time, Gangda had already been beaten to the point of vomiting blood, but no one went up to help. Because the surroundings were filled with people, the prison guards did not notice anything wrong. Finally, Gangda could not take it anymore and fell heavily to the ground. At this time, the smiling Mu Zhiguang's eyes flashed with viciousness, and he smashed his fist towards Gangda's neck. Under the heavenly mystic immortal lord's disbelieving gaze, Gangda covered his throat and widened his eyes. After struggling for a while, he slowly lost his life. At this moment, the originally noisy cafeteria instantly fell silent. Everyone seemed very frightened, because Gangda, who originally had hopes of becoming a tyrant in the prison, was actually beaten to death. And he was beaten to death in a duel. At this moment, they looked at Mu Zhiguang with eyes full of fear. At the same time, they knew that Mu Zhiguang had gotten himself into big trouble. Usually, it was fine to do whatever he wanted, but when someone died, it was like crossing a minefield, and the consequences were extremely serious. Just as the prisoners were shocked by this, a wisp of soul floated out of the already dead Gangda's body. At the same time, the power from the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared. At this moment, the heavenly mystic immortal lord finally could not sit still. He still had important uses for Yu Yao's soul. Although there was an accident now, he had to retrieve it and prepare for the next step. Therefore, he made his move. Far away in the heaven realm, he circulated all the divine power in his body and crossed realms to try to interfere with the direction of Yu Yao's soul. He was prepared to intercept Yu Yao's soul before the 6 paths of reincarnation took it away. Doing so would consume a huge amount of divine power, but the heavenly mystic immortal lord could no longer care about this. At this moment, he was betting on a short moment. As long as he was not discovered, it would not be a problem. Even if the great emperor of the underworld found out later, he could deny it without evidence. His divine power slowly gathered in the sky above the prison. But just as he was about to make his move, the power in the 6 paths of reincarnation suddenly strengthened and took Yu Yao's soul away. Seeing this, the heavenly mystic immortal lord's face turned extremely gloomy, and he immediately withdrew his power. After a short period of contemplation, his figure, who was in the heavenly policy mirror, slowly disappeared on the spot. This time, he decided to sneak into the 6 paths of reincarnation again. Just like before, he quietly took Yu Yao's soul away from the 6 paths of reincarnation. While crossing realms, the heavenly mystic immortal lord felt very upset. Before this, he had never miscalculated, but he did not expect that his important chess piece would be defeated by an ordinary martial arts cultivator in the mortal world. It was really embarrassing. Soon, through the torn space passage, his figure appeared in the 6 paths of reincarnation shrouded in mist. Following the aura of the mark, he found Yu Yao's soul drifting forward. But just as he was about to take Yu Yao away like last time, a bell suddenly rang in the surroundings. Hearing the bell, the heavenly mystic immortal lord's expression changed, and he immediately wanted to tear the space to escape. But the space crack he tore was instantly restored to its original state after the bell rang. At this moment, the heavenly mystic immortal lord knew that he was in trouble. As he stared in horror, a figure with countless colorful rule strings floating around him appeared in front of him. Great Emperor of Dongyu! Heavenly mystic, you've crossed the line. How did you find out that I'm here? It's just a coincidence. I was just checking out the 6 paths of reincarnation, and I didn't expect to see you here. I think I saw you trying to steal the soul. Hearing this, the heavenly mystic immortal lord's expression turned ugly, but he knew that he could not leave easily. Now that he had been caught, no one could save him except the immortal emperor. Seeing that the heavenly mystic immortal lord was silent, the great emperor of Dongyu waved his hand, and a brass bell suddenly fell, trapping the heavenly mystic immortal lord within it before flying back to his hand. At this moment, the great Emperor of Dong Yu could not help but laugh. Just now, he received a message from the 6 paths of reincarnation. The message was blank, without any indication. But the confused great Emperor of Dong Yu still decided to come to the 6 paths of reincarnation. Because the 6 paths of reincarnation was very important to the underworld, there was no room for error. As a result, he caught the heavenly mystic Immortal Lord who was about to take Yu Yao's soul. The heavenly mystic Immortal Lord could not give any reason to refute. This was because this was the 6 paths of reincarnation, not the territory of the heavenly realm. It was a forbidden area of the underworld, so it was not a place that could be entered and exited at will. Back when the heavenly realm thoroughly investigated the 6 paths of reincarnation, they used the heaven-defying alliance as an excuse to have the 3 immortal emperors personally negotiate with the 3 great emperors of the underworld to thoroughly investigate the 6 paths of reincarnation. But this time, there was no reason, no excuse, and they were sneaking in. This had violated the underworld's taboo. It was reasonable for the great Emperor of Dong Yu to make a move. As the great Emperor of Dong Yu waited, a golden statue slowly appeared in the 6 paths of reincarnation. The golden light forced the mist away, and the statue became vivid and lifelike, with the 10 prayer beads revolving around it. The newcomer was East Monarch Tai. Heavenly Mystic has violated the taboo. You did not do anything wrong. But he is my subordinate, let him go. East Monarch Tai looked at the great Emperor of Dong Yu indifferently. Reason. This is a strand of your rule. I will return it to you now to offset Heavenly Mystic's mistake. As he spoke, a strand of rule ribbon floated out from the prayer beads on top of East Monarch Tai's head. This was the strand of rule ribbon that the great Emperor of Dong Yu had given out when he took the blame for Lu Wu. After receiving this strand of rule ribbon, the great Emperor of Dong Yu nodded and released the brass bell with a wave of his hand, and the figure of heavenly mystic deity emerged from the bell. East Monarch Tai nodded and reached out to grab the still confused heavenly mystic deity into the prayer bead. His figure suddenly disappeared from the 6 paths of reincarnation. Seeing this, the great Emperor of Dong Yu smiled. It seemed like he did not expect to retrieve the lost strand of rule ribbon in this way. He turned to look at the 6 paths of reincarnation fog and murmured softly, "Thank you." Then, his figure slowly disappeared into the 6 paths of reincarnation fog. Lu Wu and Lil Bailey, who saw this scene, turned around and high-fived each other. They could not help but smile. The ultimate goal of digging this trap was to make the heavenly realm passive, so that the great Emperor of Dong Yu could seize the initiative. Previously, Lu Wu could be said to have owed the great Emperor of Dong Yu. If it weren't for him, Lu Wu would have been caught red-handed by Dong Huang Tai. As a result, the great monarch of the East Mountain lost one of the 3,000 strands of laws around him. It was a huge loss. However, Lu Wu and Lil Bailey were already discussing how to punish the heavenly mystic deity lord when they realized that he was up to no good. Their ultimate goal wasn't just to remove the pawn that the heavenly mystic immortal monarch had placed in the human world, but to dig a trap for the heavenly mystic immortal monarch who was hiding behind the scenes to jump into it. As for what to do, Lu Wu and Little Bailey had a discussion and finally decided on the plan. He first killed Gangda, and then had his soul enter the 6 paths of reincarnation. This was also the reason why the 6 paths of reincarnation's suction had strengthened after Gangda's death, preventing the Sky Mystic Immortal Lord from intercepting him. As expected, the heavenly mystic deity lord took the bait and once again entered the 6 paths of reincarnation, intending to take away Yu Yao's soul using the same method as before. However, this time, Lil Bailey controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation in advance and sent a blank message to the great monarch of the East Mountain, attracting his attention. As expected, the great monarch of the East Mountain came after hearing the news and wanted to investigate the situation. Just like that, he coincidentally caught the heavenly mystic. This time, Dong Wangtai had no reason to ask the great monarch of the East Mountain to hand over Yu Yao, so he could only return the strand of law to make up for the heavenly mystic's mistake. Lu Wu and Lil Bei Li's plan was a perfect success. Meanwhile, in a certain prison, Mu Zhiguang, who had committed a huge crime, was locked in solitary confinement. He robbed a bank with a water gun, was caught smoking calmly, and killed someone after a few days in prison. The prison guards were really annoyed by his performance. What awaited Mu Zhiguang was a death sentence. Lu Wu and Lil Bei Li were very calm about this. The soul could be retrieved, and the only thing they had to give up was Black Tiger's body. They could get a new one another day. Perfect. Chapter 575. This time, although Tianxian Deity Lord was lured into the trap and the great emperor of Dong Yu successfully retrieved a strand of the law, Lu Wu also began to consider the development of the human world. After this incident, Lu Wu noticed that the heaven realm had noticed some changes, although they had yet to find out the reason. In fact, Lu Wu also understood that the heaven realm had never cared much about the development of the human world. Because the human world was already in the age of degeneration, there were only a few cultivators in the world, and they could not compete with the heaven realm at all. Therefore, the forces of the heaven realm were very confident about the human world. It could be said that, in their view, the human world had no future, and it was impossible for a powerhouse like the Emperor to be born. And Lu Wu and Lil Bei Li took advantage of this. They lured humans into the underworld and used the underworld's forces to develop in the underworld, which was full of spiritual energy. However, in the eyes of the heaven realm, the human world was still the decadent human world. The humans were also mediocre, and there were no super cultivators. As for the development of human technology, the arrogant heavenly gods did not care about it at all. To them, the human world that had given up on cultivation was useless. Even if they occasionally paid attention to the human world, they only paid attention to the cultivators, not the power of technology. They would not pay attention to the popularity of a game or the rise of virtual reality equipment. With all these factors combined, Lu Wu and Lil Bei Li's deception was not discovered at all, and there were no signs of them being discovered. However, Lu Wu also began to think of countermeasures for the Tianxian Deity Lord, who had begun to pay attention to the human world and wanted to investigate the remnant god's negative body. Although the Tianxian Deity Lord, who had suffered a great loss, should not think of placing a pawn in the human world in the short term. But it was uncertain in the future. If another pawn appeared, Lu Wu began to think about how he should deal with it. This time, Gangda's encounter with the martial arts cultivation powerhouse, Mu Zhiguang, could be considered a coincidence. The death penalty after the incident also erased the traces of Mu Zhiguang's existence. But what if it was the next time? Another coincidence like this would arouse suspicion. Lil Bei Li came up with a plan for this. That was to detect the soul. As long as it was a spy from the heaven realm, Lil Bei Li could predict it in advance and then use the artifact to mark the soul of the pawn for precaution. Although this chess piece would definitely not be able to find the deity's negative body, totem, stored in the artifact dimension. However, while he was exploring the human world, he might come across the extremely popular battle game. Although it was unlikely that he would discover the problem, who knew if the heavenly mystic Immortal Lord would investigate further? Therefore, Lil Bei Li's plan was to mark the chess pieces and then create a different world of conquest for them. In other words, the other players were playing battle online. However, if the pawns that the heavenly mystic deity monarch planted in the human world started to fight, they would be playing a different game. Moreover, as a chess piece, it was impossible for him to actually play the game. All he did was investigate, and it was very easy for him to fool the heavenly mystic Immortal Lord. However, this plan also needed to be perfected. For example, there were many battle game videos on the internet. If the game was different from the chess pieces, it could easily cause unnecessary trouble. Therefore, since they were going to fake it, they had to make it more realistic. Hence, after a discussion with Lil Bailey, Lu Wu decided to create a virtual world for the Tianxian deity lord's chess piece the next time. Let him toss and turn inside. After tricking the heavenly mystic deity lord, Lu Wu met an old friend in the artifact. It was the soul of His Excellency Yu Yao. In Lu Wu's opinion, this guy's experience was quite pitiful. He was tricked by the players and broke up with his brothers. Although he temporarily became the king of Beiki and thought that he had reached the peak of his life, he died tragically in the hands of the players. However, even after his death, he could not rest in peace and was manipulated by the heavenly mystic deity lord as a chess piece. The latter half of his life was a tragedy. However, this time, Lu Wu decided to recycle him and did not let him enter the 6 paths of reincarnation. Instead, after some modifications, he was sent to the non-server in the form of an NPC. He became an NPC that was loved by the non-server players and strengthened his equipment. After dealing with the complicated affairs, Lu Wu looked at the players again. Recently, the war between Beiki and the Corpse Clan was at a heated stage. While the Corpse Clan was fighting against Beiki, they also took the initiative to fight against the neighboring forces in the Land of Death. Although the Corpse Clan was under great pressure, compared to fighting against the Player Clan and other forces, the Corpse Clan at least had a huge advantage. The corpses of other forces could be plundered after they died in battle. Faced with the repeated attacks of the players, the Corpse Clan only wanted to create a corpse hill as soon as possible. Only then could they gain the upper hand. Because the Corpse Hill was not only used to cooperate in battles and defend against foreign enemies, it also had a key function, which was to help the unconscious Hidorigami recover from his injuries and wake him up in advance. Therefore, they took the risk and chose to fight on both sides. On the other hand, the players were simpler. They only wanted soul coins, and their thoughts were simple and unpretentious. Their daily routine was to move corpses, sell them, move corpses and sell them again. With the development of various ways to use corpses, the market demand increased. As a result, the price of the corpses of the Corpse Clan warriors continued to rise. Moving corpses became a daily activity that earned a lot of soul coins. Although it was a little hard and easy to die, the return was high. Many rich players were willing to buy them, and the brick-moving players enjoyed it. In fact, the existence of tycoon players in the game was a good thing for all the brick-moving players, and it was not a bad thing that would destroy the balance of the game. From Lu Wu's point of view, perhaps some players' behavior of exchanging soul coins for cash was a huge loss. After all, soul coins were soul power, and they were extremely useful. How could they be compared to cash? However, from the player's point of view, although soul coins were very important and could enrich their gaming experience, there was a big regret, and that was the problem in reality. Because in reality, money was also needed. But where would the money come from? The commoner brick-moving players were unable to guarantee their expenses in real life. First of all, buying a gaming chamber was an expense, and the nutrition solution that could help the players stay online for 24 hours was a continuous expense. Other than that, there was also the need to take care of their families, and so on. These were all things that required cash. If there was no source of income, how could they play the game better? The existence of the nouveau riche players was the perfect solution to this problem. They could spend money in real life to help these brick-moving players cope with their real-life expenses. Saying that the existence of tycoon players would make the game unfair was completely non-existent for Battle. Since Battle did not have the function of topping up money, the tycoon players had an advantage in certain aspects, and they had to pay equivalent benefits in real life in exchange. And the ones who benefited were, of course, these commoner brick-moving players. Therefore, when Lu Wu set up the Soul Coin Exchange, he did not take cash as a processing fee. He was taking care of these brick-moving players, so that they could solve their real-life needs and play the game better. As for the processing fee of soul coins, it was not to suppress the tycoon players, but because he needed soul coins too. Compared to cash, Lu Wu naturally cared more about soul coins. Moreover, the processing fee was not high, only 1%. For the players who bought soul coins, it was completely within the acceptable range. However, for Lu Wu, the huge transaction volume every day allowed him to earn a lot of soul coins. The existence of tycoon players was not only not harmful to battle, but beneficial instead. Moreover, there were many other factors that affected the strength of the players other than soul coins. Luck was one of them, understanding of the game was another, and honing one's own combat skills was another. There were many such factors. Although the tycoon players had fancy equipment, they did not always have the upper hand. This was like many life professions. These professions could not be obtained just by having soul coins. Without diligently reading professional books and continuously learning and improving, it was impossible to obtain these life professions, no matter how many soul coins were spent. It could be said that Battle Royale was a game that was fair to all players. Hard work, talent, luck, and other aspects were all important factors that affected the development of the players, which made battle more like a second world. Therefore, these brick-moving players would sell some of their soul coins to the tycoon players on the soul coin exchange, in addition to improving their own strength and purchasing consumable items. They would not feel that they were being treated unfairly, but would be grateful instead. Similarly, the tycoon players were the same, they were also grateful to the commoner players. This was because without them, they would not have any shortcuts to obtain soul coins if the scummy officials did not open a top-up channel. Of course, it was one thing for the players to exchange needs and be grateful to each other, but the players had a unified attitude towards the scummy officials. Regardless of whether they were tycoon players or commoner players, all they had to say was that the scummy officials did not give out soul coins, did not open any activities, and were simply stingy. When it came to dissing the scummy officials, the players did their best. They would not be happy if they did not do so. In contrast, Lu Wu was very calm. No matter what they said, he was not going to listen to them. The players had no way to deal with Lu Wu, they could only choose to compromise and continue dissing him on the forum. At this time, Lu Wu was checking the situation of the players in the forum and in the game as usual. Apart from the game, the forum was a platform for the players to learn, show off, understand the hot topics in the game, and so on. It was a comprehensive platform that had great significance. For Lu Wu, the value of the battle forum was completely different. It was the place where the officials posted announcements, it was also one of the areas where the artifact detected abnormal situations, and it was also one of the channels for Lu Wu to check on major events. At this time, a post in the forum caught Lu Wu's attention. "Brothers, I bumped into the Sea King at the Void Ocean just now. I thought he was going to smash my ship, but he told me that he's here to negotiate. What do you guys think?" Post office poster content. Video attachment. In the video, the Sea King jumped onto the player's ship and told him that he wanted to negotiate with the player clan to plan something big. And this matter was related to the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. The specific matter was about a shipping plan. The Sea King wanted to do evil, but it was not appropriate for him to do it. After all, he was a member of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, he turned his attention to the players. After all, compared to himself, it was normal for these gangsters to rob others. Even if the Underworld Chamber of Commerce came to investigate, they would not find anything. Instead, the forces in the nearby sea area would blurt out, "What? The player clan robbed others? Isn't that normal?" For the nearby sea area forces who were used to the player clan robbing merchant ships, it would be strange if the player clan did not rob others. After all, in the eyes of these sea area forces, the player clan could only be described with one word: reckless. In their eyes, the player clan was not afraid of anything. Interests came first, happiness came second, and the importance of life was nothing. In the eyes of these sea area forces, there was only one reason why the player clan did not rob others. Maybe they were reckless and their clan was exterminated. Chapter 576. Baki Liuli Coast. The news of the Sea King's arrival spread from the forum to the game. Suddenly, a large number of players gathered at Liuli Coast, wanting to see an old acquaintance that they hadn't seen for a long time. The Sea King, who was affectionately called the Leek King by the players, was very popular among the players. This was the third year in a row that he was the most popular villain. Although he wasn't the strongest among the villains, the Sea King's biggest advantage was his huge potential for growth. After spending 3 years with the players, the Sea King was the overlord of the Void Ocean, the Death Lord, and controlled the Death Legion. Then, he gathered the power of the 7 nations and established the Mu-Te Sea Nation. Until now, the Sea King had grown to become the president of the War Chamber of Commerce, a symbol of power. It could be said that the players didn't stop, and the Sea King didn't either. The more setbacks he faced, the braver he became. His strength rose to a higher level after every transformation. After 3 years of fighting, the players had developed a bond with the Sea King. Although they would still fight him, it didn't affect his popularity among the players. A player in the forum even wrote a 300,000-word biography of the Sea King, the history of the struggle of the sea, which showed how popular he was. Now that the Sea King was here, a large number of players rushed to Liuli Coast. Even some newbie players followed the trend, wanting to see for themselves how the Sea King, who was known as the most popular villain by the veteran players, looked like. At this moment, a black full moon was speeding from the horizon above the sea, setting off huge waves along the way. It was shooting toward Liuli Coast at an extremely fast speed. The players weren't unfamiliar with this black full moon. It used to be Mu Zhiguang's weapon. After his death, it had been in the Sea King's possession. It could be said that the players could determine the person's identity just by looking at the full moon. Unlike before, the Sea King didn't bring his Mu-Te Empire's navy with him this time. He was alone. As he approached the Liuli Coast, he hovered in the air and slowly landed on the coast. Looking at the crowd of players who were watching him like a monkey, the veins on the Sea King's forehead twitched. However, he held it in after some thought. He was here to seek cooperation, not to cause trouble. As an internal member of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce, the Sea King recently received an order from the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. He was asked to protect 5 merchant ships that were passing by the Kuelong Ocean and heading to the Scarlet Ocean. Initially, the Sea King wanted to do as he was told. However, when he was collecting information, he realized that the 5 merchant ships that were about to arrive at the Kuelong Ocean were transporting ice fire stones. His thoughts changed instantly. The ice fire stone was a kind of gemstone that only existed at the bottom of the devouring sea, and it would only be produced in a special environment where extreme cold and extreme heat intersected. This kind of gem had a powerful effect. It could combine conflicting attributes and balance them. Whether it was forging or alchemy, the addition of this gem would have a significant effect. Moreover, it would greatly reduce the probability of failure in forging and alchemy. It could even be used to forge weapons, equipment, or medicinal pills with conflicting attribute. For example, weapons and pills that coexisted with ice and fire attribute. The greatest effect of the ice fire stone was spirit enhancement, which could be used to reforge the original equipment and improve its quality. However, because they weren't produced in large quantities, this type of gem was extremely rare and precious, reaching the range of a 6th-tier treasure. Therefore, after understanding the situation, the Sea King suddenly had a new idea. Although he had joined the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce, his ambitions did not stop there. A year ago, he had an idea to replace the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce and become the overlord of the ocean. After a conversation with the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce's Eldering, the idea took root in the Sea King's mind. Since the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce could do it, why couldn't he? The power of the underworld was not eternal. Could he become the new king that overthrew the old force? For this reason, The Sea King had been planning on how to use the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce's power to strengthen himself step by step until he finally got rid of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce's control. Then, he could compete with the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce and even devour it. For the past 6 months, the Sea King had been well behaved. Although he had many ideas, he didn't take any action. After all, the price of taking a wrong step was very serious and there was no way to recover. However, this time, when he found out that the shipment of resources was Ice Firestone, the Sea King couldn't sit still. This was because the Ice Firestone would be of great help to the development of his force. For example, building high-tier Spectre warships, forging high-tier weapons, enchantment of existing high-tier equipment, and even refining medicinal pills that could improve his strength. As long as he got this batch of resources, the Sea King felt that he could save at least 100 years of hard work. For this reason, the Sea King decided to go all out and do something big. However, it was naturally not enough to rely on himself. After all, he was the protector in name, so he still needed help from an external force. Looking at Kuelong and the Void Ocean, the Sea King consulted many forces. He even thought of Langia Island and other original hostile forces. However, the Sea King gave up in the end, because these forces were obviously lacking in courage, not to mention their strength. The Sea King felt that they would most likely betray him first if he asked them to go against the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. After thinking about it, the Sea King still felt that the Player Clan was more reliable. It could even be said that this kind of dangerous mission should be done by the Player Clan. After all, they were famous for not being afraid of death for the sake of benefit. Not to mention robbing the merchant ships of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. The Sea King suspected that the Player Clan would even dare to rob the forces of the Protoss in the Central Ocean as long as there were benefits. Therefore, he came. As long as the Player Clan and the evil forces were willing to cooperate, he would definitely do it. However, at this moment, when he saw the players looking at him as if he was a monkey, the Sea King couldn't help but clench his fists, feeling insulted. He even vaguely heard one of the players saying, "Why are you squeezing? Civilized chives. Motherf asterisk cur, what do you think I am? Also, what the hell is chives?" At this moment, Gu Yu, Lu Chai, and a dozen other guild leaders walked out of the crowd and stopped near the Sea King. "Sea King boss, what can I do for you?" Sun Chi extended his little paw and waved at the Sea King as if he was an acquaintance. Upon seeing this, the Sea King rolled his eyes. The Sea King was quite familiar with these few fellows. Whether it was when he established the country or when the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce held a meeting, these few figures would always appear. He knew that they had a high status in the Player Clan. "I have a big deal to cooperate with you. It depends on whether you dare to do it or not," the Sea King immediately said. "Sea King boss, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't provoke us, we won't fall for it," Gu Yu heard and said with a smile. The Sea King nodded and did not hide anything. He told them the orders of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce and the results of his investigation. After the explanation, the Sea King spoke again. "I've told you everything that I know. Are you interested?" Gu Yu and the others fell silent and began to chat privately in the live chat channel. "Gu Yu, Sea Leak is really awesome. He's thinking of growing up again. He's so motivated," laughing emoji, Sun Chi. "Boss, this is a good thing. Let's agree to it. Although we don't know what this Ice Firestone is, it must be something good since Sea Leak wants it so much." Lu Chai, "I agree too. However, the distribution of the profits is a problem. Let's make it clear to Sea Leak first." Chunziu, "I'm fine with it. You guys decide. I'll be your fighter." Lu Zhan, "I agree too. If there's a profit to be made, we must do it. It's not like we're losing anything." Laughing emoji. After a while, Gu Yu, who had made his decision, raised his head and smiled. "Sea King, it's definitely not a problem to do this. However, how are we going to distribute the profits?" The Sea King had already thought about this before he came. He said without hesitation, "You're right." He said without hesitation, "I'll provide the specific transportation route and other information. Therefore, it's 7-3. I'll get 70% and you guys get 30%. Hearing the Sea King's distribution method, Gu Yu, Sun Chi, and the others could not help but look disgusted. Look at this, is this something a leek should say? Leeks take the majority of the profits while we only get 30% after all the hard work we put in to nurture you. This is ridiculous. Sea Leek. Sea King, you're not being sincere at all. Why can't it be 70% for us and 30% for you? Sun Chi could not help but stare at him. The Sea King could not help but stare at him. Without my cooperation, you guys wouldn't even know when the transportation ship will arrive or what route it will take. I'm already being generous by giving you 30%. You can't do it without us. Apart from us, who else would dare to rob the Underworld Chamber of Commerce with you? Moreover, we're the ones who have to take the blame for this. When we fight, we'll also be the ones who put in the effort. Doesn't your conscience hurt when you ask for 70%? Sun Chi asked in disgust. It won't hurt. The Sea King glared at Sun Chi and replied. Sun Chi was speechless. At this moment, Lu Chai could not help but say, "How about this? I'll come up with a plan. Everyone, please take a step back. We, the Player Clan, are not an unreasonable force, right?" The Sea King heard him and cursed in his heart. The Player Clan is reasonable? You're still asking me? I'm your father. After thinking about it, the Sea King decided to listen to Lu Chai's proposal first. Say it. I know that everyone is thinking about their own interests, so fairness is very important. After careful consideration, I feel that it's more appropriate for the Player Clan to take 60% and you take 40%. It's fair and reasonable. Fair my A*S. Reasonable my A*S. Looking at Lu Chai's serious face, the Sea King really wanted to use the Death's Light Wheel in his hand to test how thick his skin was. How could he say such shameless words in such a serious manner? How is this a step back? It's practically a swap with the plan that I suggested. The Sea King immediately shook his head. There's no room for discussion. At most, we'll take a step back. I'll take 60% and you guys take 40%. That's too much. I object to your decision. Is there anyone else who has the same idea as me? Sun Chi raised his little paw as he spoke. Gu Yu and the others were stunned. After some thought, they also raised their hand. The crowd of players behind also raised their hands when they saw this. After a while, all the players on the coast raised their hand. The Sea King was dumbfounded. Sea King boss, this is a democratic vote. Everyone thinks that your proposal is immoral. The eyes of the crowd are clear. Now you're the only one who agrees. Everyone else is against it. Sun Chi said seriously. At this moment, the Sea King really wanted to start a massacre. I'm F***King negotiating with you, but you're playing a game of voting with me. I look so easy to bully. If you guys agree, then agree. If not, I'll find another force. The Sea King said with a pale face. Go ahead. Can you still find another force to cooperate with? At most, no one will be able to earn anything. Go Zi said, unwilling to admit defeat. In order to get more benefits for their side, the Sea King, Sun Chi, and the others began to argue endlessly. Until the sky turned dark, neither side could convince the other. Therefore, they continued to argue through the night. Chapter 577. Baiki Liuli Coast. The sky gradually darkened and the players who came to visit the Sea King gradually dispersed. However, the negotiation on the distribution of benefits was not over yet. At this moment, the Sea King, Gu Yu, and the others were sitting on the beach in a circle around the bonfire. Their faces were extremely solemn. The meat is almost done, the dog said as he looked at the ingredients on the grill with a solemn face. Seeing that no one responded, the dog continued, Why don't we talk after eating? I'm a little hungry. I'm too embarrassed to cook if you guys don't eat. The Sea King, Guyu, and the others looked at each other but still nodded. Thus, everyone started eating. During this time, Guyu and the others shared Bakey's specialty wood spirit wine with the Sea King. The Sea King also took out Mu Ti's specialty sea spirit wine. The atmosphere instantly became very harmonious. However, a new round of negotiation began after the meal. The atmosphere instantly returned to its original tense state. Both sides argued with each other and gave their own reasons. The Sea King's reason was that he was the mastermind and initiator of this plunder. It was absolutely impossible for him to only take 40% of the spoils. Moreover, he had taken a huge risk in this plan, so he had to take 60%. There was no room for negotiation. On the player's side, Guyu and the others had many excuses. They used all kinds of excuses at this moment. For example, after this plundering, many of our clansmen will definitely die, and we will definitely have to pay for the settlement. Another example is that we have a large number of players, so we won't get much after the distribution. So we have to take more. The Sea King was dumbfounded as he listened to all the excuses that came out of his mouth. When the discussion reached a critical point, the dog immediately brought out the proposal of voting. It was fair and just very democratic. Of course, the Sea King was not stupid enough to agree. If they really had to vote, the Sea King felt that he would have to get the Mu Te army to vote. At this moment, he was alone and there were more than 10 people in front of him. What the F***ck? Judging from the shamelessness of the player clan, they could get 90% and he could even get 10%. In short, both sides could not reach an agreement on the distribution of benefits no matter how they discussed. Neither side was willing to give in. In the end, it became a situation where they could only stare at each other helplessly. At this moment, Yi Shui said with a serious expression, "Sea King, I know you want to improve your strength as soon as possible. I also know that you're very motivated, but you have to be reasonable. We're all familiar with each other, and this can't go on. How about this? You give up one floor, and the player clan will owe you a favor." The Sea King rolled his eyes and refused without hesitation. "No, you can give me 10%. I'll owe you a favor." "What? Is a favor from our player clan worthless?" Sun Chi couldn't help but slap the ground with his paw as he glared at the Sea King. "You're just a white phantom. Why do you keep claiming to be from the player clan? Have you forgotten what race you're from after getting so close to the player clan?" the Sea King said as he looked at Sun Chi disdainfully. When Go Zi heard this, he felt like he was struck by lightning. This had always been a pain in his heart. Now that the wound had been poked, he couldn't help but bare his teeth and reveal his ferocious face. However, when faced with the Sea King, he resisted the urge to charge forward and kill him. After all, he was no match for him. The Sea King could not help but laugh as he looked at the angry and sullen Sun Chi. "Forget it. There's no point in continuing this discussion. Let's all take a step back and split the loot 50-50. How about that?" In the face of the 50-50 proposal, Guyu and the others still looked like they were at a disadvantage. After a moment of silence, they finally nodded in agreement. The Sea King had a new understanding of the player clan's greed. He felt that if he didn't propose a 50-50 split, these fellows would continue to fight with him and fight for their lifespans. "That's settled then. I'll go back and continue to collect information. When the time comes, I'll send someone to inform you of the specific itinerary of the merchant ship." As he spoke, the Sea King stood up and summoned the Death's Light Wheel. He leaped up and shot into the sky with the light wheel. The negotiation had officially ended. Apart from Sun Chi, Guyu and the others were all smiling. Although they kept saying during the negotiation with the Sea King that the player clan would lose many of their clansmen in this battle and that they would suffer heavy losses, in reality, there were no losses at all. To them, this round of plundering was a business without any cost. It was the kind where they would definitely make a profit. Now that they had obtained 50% of the loot, everyone was actually very satisfied. However, after talking for a whole night, everyone was a little tired. After saying goodbye to each other, they went their separate ways. After everyone left, Guyu turned his head and looked at the dog who was lying in front of the bonfire, biting his claws with an autistic look on his face. He said, "Sun Chi, let's go." The dog did not say a word and looked aggrieved. "Don't be sad. Have you forgotten that this game is full of opportunities? Who knows when you'll encounter an opportunity to transform into a human?" After spending so much time together, Guyu could tell what was on the dog's mind at a glance and immediately comforted him. "Boss, it's been 3 years. Have you lost your way with this opportunity?" The dog raised his head with an autistic look on his face. Hearing this, Guyu felt extremely ashamed. Just as he was about to open his mouth to persuade him again, a server announcement suddenly rang in his mind. Server announcement. The Mansion of the Dead has a new NPC. Mu Guang, Spiritual Augmentation Master. NPC details. Mu Guang, who is proficient in the ability of spiritual augmentation. He is adept at enhancing weapons and equipment. NPC functions. Players can enhance their weapons and equipment at Mu Guang's place. They can enhance their weapons and equipment by stacking them. Need to prepare the materials and pay the handling fee. Enhancement hint. Equipment below level 150 does not provide enhancement function. Equipment above level 150 has an upper limit of enhancement based on the quality of the equipment. White equipment enhancement is not available. From low to high they are blue, red, purple, epic, legendary, 1 to 10, unreleased. Weapon and equipment enhancement list. Level 150 blue weapon and equipment, highest enhancement is +2. For every increase in quality, the upper limit increases by 1. Level 200 blue weapon and equipment, highest enhancement is +3. For every increase in quality, the upper limit increases by 1. Level 250 blue weapon and equipment, highest enhancement is +4. For every increase in quality, the upper limit increases by 1. Level 300 enhancement basic blue equipment, success rate and effect list. Enhancement +1. 100%, need to provide 1 ice firestone for each enhancement, 50 soul coins handling fee, enhancement 2 to 4. 80%, need to provide 3 ice firestones for each enhancement, 100 soul coins handling fee, enhancement 5 to 8. 60%, need to provide 5 ice firestones for each enhancement, 200 soul coins handling fee, enhancement 9-12. 50%, need to provide 10 ice firestones for each enhancement, 400 soul coins handling fee, enhancement 12-18. 20%, need to provide 25 ice firestones for each enhancement, 800 soul coins handling fee, enhancement 18 to 25. 8%, need to provide 100 ice firestones for each enhancement, 2000 soul coins handling fee. Enhancement +25 and above will be activated after the Ghost King trial is released. Enhancement effect. Enhancement is affected by the quality of the weapon. The higher the quality, the higher the enhancement rate at each stage and the higher the number of enhancements that can be carried. The influence of the weapon's level is small. Enhancement hint. After reaching the upper limit of enhancement, enhancement can be carried out, but there is a chance that the weapon will not be able to bear the power of spiritual attachment and will be destroyed. Enhancement hint 2. When you level up and need a new weapon, you can decompose the weapon in your hand to recycle the enhancement material and destroy the weapon. Decompose recovery rate 1% to 100% depending on the ability of the decomposer. Decomposer will be released in the near future. Official hint. Enhancement is risky. Please proceed with caution. While the players were in an uproar, Lu Wu, who was behind the scenes, smiled. Guyu and the others had been negotiating with the Sea King the whole night, and he had been watching from the sidelines. For this reason, Lu Wu specifically asked Lil Bailey what this ice firestone was and why the Sea King wanted it so badly. From Lil Bailey's description, Lu Wu found out that this was a special treasure used for spiritual attachment, enchantment, and it was extremely rare. After understanding its use, Lu Wu started to think about how the players should use this batch of ice fire stones if they obtained it. At this time, Lil Bailey suggested to open up the enhancement function for weapons and equipment. This was because the greatest effect of a treasure like the ice fire stone was not for alchemy or forging, but for spiritual attachment, which could strengthen and transform weapons for the second time. After that, Lu Wu decisively introduced a new NPC, Mu Guang. Otherwise, he was afraid that the players who did not know the importance of the ice fire stone would waste it after obtaining it. And this enhancement NPC, Mu Guang, was made from the soul of Mu Zhiguang who had returned. Bailey had inputted a lot of enhancement knowledge into his mind, and it was very reliable. This time, he was put into the Mansion of the Dead to carry the heavy responsibility of allowing the players to use the ice fire stone reasonably. However, the enhancement function that Lu Wu opened up was not as cheat-like as other games. This was because it was not easy for the players to have a good weapon or equipment. Usually, the players could carry bricks day and night for a good piece of equipment, and Lu Wu had seen it all. Therefore, for the enhancement function in battle, Lu Wu set the enhancement limit for the corresponding weapon. As long as the limit was not reached, even if the players failed to enhance, the weapon would not shatter. At most, it would remain unchanged. Of course, if there were some stubborn players who wanted to enhance after reaching the limit, Lu Wu would not stop them. However, if they failed, the weapon and equipment would definitely not be used. Stubbornness would definitely pay the price. Of course, Lu Wu would not do anything wasteful. For these damaged weapons, Lu Wu would choose to recycle them at 5% of their original price and return them to the players who failed the enhancement in the form of soul coins as a form of consolation. As for the recovered equipment, since he had the artifact in his hands, Lu Wu could completely decompose them into soul coins. After deducting the 5% compensation from the players, he would earn 95% of the soul coins. Most importantly, the weapons that the players spent a lot of money on could also be decomposed and processed. The recovered materials could be recycled and used on new weapons. It could be said that no matter how much the players spent, the total amount of soul coins would not decrease. At most, it would flow to Lu Wu. As long as the players were not stubborn, they would not lose much soul coins. This time, before the players could plunder the ice and fire rocks, Lu Wu had already made preparations. At the same time, he was looking forward to the players returning with a big profit. Unlike Lu Wu, Gu Yu and the others were instantly dumbfounded when they learned about the new NPC, Mu Guang's function. The weapons and equipment on them were purple, epic quality and above. They were top-notch equipment with an extremely high enhancement limit. The enhancement function of the weapons and equipment provided by the new NPC could greatly enhance their strength in a short period of time. Naturally, they were happy about it. However, the problem was that the soul attachment required ice and fire rocks as the raw material. Moreover, they had a total of 16 pieces of equipment on them. The amount of ice and fire rocks needed to enhance them in turn was extremely huge. At this moment, they suddenly wanted to call the Sea King back and sit by the sea to discuss the distribution problem. Chapter 578. As long as they were not in the Central Sea region of the underworld, no force in the entire sea region would dare to attack them. At this moment, a black fleet appeared from afar and headed toward him. Handover is complete. I won't be responsible for anything that happens after this. It's all up to you now. Black Shark turned around and landed on the bow of the ship. After all, there would be no witnesses. The Underworld Devouring Sea Division would not listen to his side of the story. On the 5 merchant ships that were protected in the center of the fleet, the merchants were all hiding in their cabins. None of them came out, so the Sea King could not get any information out of them. At this moment, The Mu-Te fleet led by the Sea King was slowly approaching the border between the Jade Spring Sea and the Kuelong Ocean. In fact, the Underworld Merchant Guild would usually not choose the War Chamber of Commerce to escort their goods. At this moment, the players were on their way. The gloomy Sea King immediately turned to look at the few lords that floated into the air with him. This was his target. At this moment, a figure rose from the leading warship. He was wearing black leather armor, had a beard, and had only one eye. Seeing this, the Sea King really wanted to curse out loud. At the same time, the Sharkbite fleet broke through the waves and appeared behind the Mu-Te fleet. A huge group of players had gathered. Countless specter warships of different shapes and sizes had stopped along the entire coast. The players had even discussed how to hijack them. Upon seeing this, Black Shark waved his hand behind him. The main warship at the front slowly moved to the side, while the 5 merchant ships inside began to sail forward. They sailed out of the Shark-Bite fleet's protective circle and entered the central region of the Mu-Te fleet. Because the price to pay was huge. He would have to face the Underworld Merchant Guild's all-out attack. Without absolute strength, he would only be destroyed under such an attack. Upon seeing this, the Sea King thought that the player clan had arrived. He quickly gave a look to the lords beside him. Baki Liuli Coast. At that time, the players had an explosive performance. However, there were always some forces that were not afraid of death and wanted to risk their lives for this. As the huge fleet sailed, bloodthirsty black sharks surrounded them and devoured all lives along the way. Upon seeing this, Hei Sui and the other lords nodded and prepared to head to their respective warships to command the warriors to fight. Time passed. While the Sea King was waiting, he was also thinking about how he could act flawlessly. I had bought some enhancement potions and recovery potions in the shop in advance. I was currently waiting on the coast to gather enough people before setting off. They had just met before, so the Sea King had a deep impression of him. There was no way he was mistaken. What kind of concept was that? Even if there were only 100 of them in a box, it would still be 200,000 ice firestones. Yes, that's why I'm very happy, ha. Heisha couldn't help but burst into laughter. The Sea King could still clearly remember that a year ago, he had been ambushed by the forces of Langia Island and was trapped on the Nether Sea Nation's Relic Island. Just as his life was hanging by a thread, the players had arrived. On the leading battleship, there was a flag representing the War Chamber of Commerce, with the word Shark engraved on it. After all, he was a little worried about the players' acting skills. Seeing this, the Sea King smiled faintly and turned around to land on his warship. The players who received the news were excited. However, since we've made a move, we must eliminate the root of the problem. We must not leave any scourges behind. Although we've developed our strength to this point, we're still too weak compared to the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, we must go all out. Suddenly, the surface of the water rippled and countless bubbles emerged. Seeing this, the Sea King immediately went to the bow of the ship and looked into the distance. A battle was about to break out. Black sharks kept appearing on the surface of the sea, besieging the fleet led by the Sea King. However, the Sea King felt that he would have won soon after doing this. The distance between the two sides continued to shorten as time passed. At the same time, under the leadership of the Sea King, the Mu-Te War Chamber of Commerce sailed to the border of the Kuelong Ocean in advance and prepared to escort. Seeing this, the Sea King was envious. He could tell that these battleships were of high quality and must have been built at a great cost. During the voyage, the gigantic Shark Head ram at the bow of the ship let out a deafening roar from time to time, stirring up huge waves in front of them. In the live chat channel, the players were discussing about this. Alright, enough with the pleasantries. These 5 merchant ships are about to enter your jurisdiction. I will leave the rest to you. However, I want to remind you that this batch of goods is extremely important. So, you must be careful on the way. Heisha grinned and said. However, they were immediately dumbfounded. When there was no wind or waves, sailing in this ocean was like floating in the air. This was also one of the unique features of the Jade Spring Ocean. At this moment, the players were on their way to appease everyone. A few players typed this sentence in the chat channel from time to time. Thinking of this, the Sea King made a decisive move. He stomped his feet and pushed the main ship into the water. His body shot up and punched the black shark, repelling it. "I've heard about you from Eldering. He said that you have great potential. This is the first time we've met. Let's take care of each other in the future," Heisha said with a smile. "Each of you is responsible for one side. Prepare to counterattack." It was the branch of the devoured ocean of the Yellow Spring, one of the top 10 subordinate chambers of commerce, the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce. What the F***CK? That was because their name was the biggest guarantee. However, the Sea King's attention was not on the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce. He was more concerned about the 5 merchant ships that were escorted by the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce. After arriving at the border, the Sea King waited with his fleet. The Sea King nodded and waved his hand behind him. Instantly, the warships behind him dispersed, revealing a path that led to the center of the fleet. "Of course, but I'm just a newbie. I still need a senior like you to take care of me." "President of the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce, Heisha," he said in a loud voice. Every time he thought about it, he would feel awkward. From the information sent by Heiswei, the players learned that the 5 merchant ships were carrying at least 2,000 boxes of ice firestones. Obviously, this guy was also interested in this batch of goods, just like the players. However, after waiting for a long time, there was not even a shadow on the surface of the sea, let alone the Sea King. The 2 fleets adjusted their formation at the same time and sailed in their respective directions. Therefore, the players were looking forward to the arrival of the 5 merchant ships. After waiting for a day and a night, there was a sudden movement on the calm surface of the sea. Continuous ripples spread from afar. A huge black shark leaped out of the water and bit the main ship that they were on. "Don't worry, the Sea King is on his way." The players were looking forward to the huge increase in their attribute. Especially that scene where a player who was clearly dead actually scratched his buttocks after being bitten by a poisonous insect on the island. Moreover, the goods that they were escorting this time were extremely important. Therefore, the Netherworld branch of the Devouring Sea was not willing to take the risk and decided to let their subordinate War Chamber of Commerce escort it. With the ability to store warships, they could collectively summon warships and scare the hell out of them. Mute Chamber of Commerce, Muhai. Even now, the memory was still fresh in the Sea King's mind. He had already told Heiswei to tell the players about the acting. Now, he only hoped that the players would not screw him over. He wanted to rob it quickly and strengthen himself. When the Heisha fleet approached the border, the surface of the sea shook violently. The forward inertia of all the warships was cancelled out. They turned into waves that spread out in all directions and steadily stopped in front of the border. This was because this black shark was the ram of the Shark Bite Fleet's main ship. As long as we do this, we will have the confidence to go to the central sea of the Netherworld. Although it's risky, I will never give up this opportunity. Isn't this exactly what you want? The stronger they are, the greater the risk we will face. Conversely, it will be more advantageous for us. Therefore, he could only hope that this group of evil forces would be more effective at the crucial moment and not screw him over. However, what the Sea King did not know was that not long after the Shark Bite fleet left, they suddenly changed direction and sailed towards the Kuelong Ocean. Therefore, he had to put on a good show to let these merchants understand that he was risking his life to protect them, but he was helpless. Different from the sparkling blue seawater of the Kuelong Ocean, the seawater of the Jade Spring Ocean was very clear. The creatures swimming under the water were even clearer, as if there were no impurities in it. Looks like the plan will be successful this time. The Mute Chamber of Commerce is indeed weak. How can they become a member of the War Chamber of Commerce with these broken warships? They even managed to squeeze out the Smoke Dragon and Smoke Wolf brothers. Unbelievable. Although he had decided to hijack the goods, the Sea King knew that he had to protect the merchants on the ship. Looking at the huge black shark, the Sea King blurted out the word F***CK that he learned from the player clan. While he was looking forward to it, the Sea King was a little worried. The merchant fleet that was transporting the Icefire Stone would enter the Kuelong Ocean the day after tomorrow. He did not expect Black Shark to play such a trick. Meanwhile, on the Sharkbite main ship, Black Shark grinned and said, "Just yesterday, the players received news from the Sea King's subordinate, Black Sway. Compared to the Sea King's Chamber of Commerce, this Chamber of Commerce was obviously much better equipped. It was even stronger than the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce. Moreover, if they were the only ones alive in the end and all the merchants were dead, it would be too fake. It would definitely cause unnecessary trouble. After all, the idiotic players were sometimes very reliable, but sometimes they could really screw people over." At this moment, the Sea King really wanted to give him a round of applause when he thought about such an amazing acting skill. At this moment, the players were all soaking in the water and looking at the sea with a bored expression. They were all hoping that the Sea Leak would bring the 5 leak ships for them to harvest. Every time they passed through a sea region, the War Chamber of Commerce in that region would be responsible for escorting the transport ship. The vice president, who was standing at the side, smiled when he heard this. The Sea King, who was standing at the bow of the ship, kept glancing forward as he pondered which direction the players would come from. Swallowed by a mysterious force, cursed by an invisible god, or having a heart attack, etc., Black Shark nodded. Above the Kuelong Ocean, the escort team led by the Sea King was advancing towards the Scarlet Ocean. After the appearance of the enhancement NPC, Mu Guang, the players finally knew the specific value of the Icefire Rock. They also understood why the Sea King was willing to take the risk to hijack this batch of merchant ship. Although the merchant ships would only arrive the day after tomorrow, the players were already restless and had already made preparations. Time passed by slowly. There were no waves during the half-day voyage. Just like that, after sailing for a while, a situation finally occurred. After all, after the enhancement of attributes, not only would they farm monsters faster, but they would also feel refreshed. This feeling was very addictive to the players. Kill him and get rich in one go. Upon seeing this, the Sea King immediately levitated into the air and nodded at Black Shark. Because the benefits were too great. These few days, the players had been looking forward to the new enhancement function for a long time. However, without the raw material of the Icefire Rock, it was impossible to enhance the weapons and equipment. In reality, the players had already made preparations and were squatting at a certain spot along the voyage route. Hei Sui and the others nodded solemnly. Then, they landed on different ships and began to fight. Chapter 579. It was a long wait. The players were speechless as the Sea King did not show up no matter what. As they were not connected to the Sea King's live chat channel, they had no idea what the Sea King was doing. They even suspected that the Sea King was messing with them on purpose. Faced with this situation, Guyu finally decided to lead his fleet along the route that the Sea King mentioned. He would then inform the players of the exact reason. The players could only continue to wait. Although they were frustrated, they were not willing to give up just like that. After all, the Icefire Stone was too tempting for them. Without the Icefire Stone, the enhancement function that they had been looking forward to was just a decoration. But soon, Gu Yu's anxious voice was heard in the live chat channel. "Everyone, come and help. The merchant ship has been cut off. Someone has attacked us first, coordinates JPG." When the players heard this, after a short period of silence, they became excited. "Which bastard doesn't want to stay in this area anymore? Let's go and help the Sea Leaks. Attack. Attack them to death." The players were still guessing what was going on. Now that they knew the reason, they could not stand it anymore. One by one, they summoned their warships and headed towards the coordinates sent by Guyu at full speed. At this moment, in front of the sea, the battle between the Sea King and the Shark Bite fleet was still ongoing. Facing the Shark Bite fleet that was much stronger than them, the Mu-Te army was having a hard time. At this moment, the Sea King finally understood how the players felt when they faced the Smoke Dragon fleet. Compared to the warships of the Shark Bite fleet, the Mu-Te army's warships could only be described as tofu dregs. In terms of warship strength, the Shark Bite fleet had an absolute advantage. Fortunately, the Sea King was extremely strong. Relying on the Death's Light wheel left by Mu Zhiguang, he was able to fight against the leader of the Shark Bite fleet, Black Shark. He even had the upper hand. However, the Sea King's eyes turned red when he saw the heavy casualties of his subordinates. After forcing the Shark Bite fleet to retreat with the light wheel, the Sea King decisively turned around and dove down, trying to stop the Shark Bite fleet from wreaking havoc. "Your opponent is me." Black Shark decisively blocked the Sea King's path. F*CKU. The Sea King waved his hand angrily, and the light wheel sped towards Black Shark. He Sha was shocked in his heart when he saw this scene, and he didn't dare resist it head-on and moved to the side decisively. However, the full moon did not slow down at all and struck the shield of a Sharkbite warship below. Energy rippled in all directions. After a short pause, the energy shield was split open, and the full moon ruthlessly smashed into the warship. Sparks flew in all directions. Under the rapid rotation of the full moon, the Sharkbite battleship, which had an extremely strong defense, was gradually cut in half and sank. At this moment, the furious Sea King erupted with absolute combat power. He Sha did not expect this at all. He had initially thought that the Sea King was just a backdoor entrant. After all, with such a weak fleet, how strong could their president be? Obviously, he was wrong. The Sea King, who had inherited the power of the Liege of Death, had stepped into the Ghost Emperor realm for a long time. He even possessed the Wheel of Death, which was left behind by Mu Zhiguang, who was at the peak of the Ghost Emperor realm. Not only was his strength not weaker than Meng Qi's, but he was even slightly stronger than Meng Qi. Therefore, as he had imagined, the situation where the battle was crushed in a short period of time did not occur. This caused He Sha to feel extremely vexed. This was because the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. At this moment, when he saw the Sea King destroying one of his warships, He Sha felt extremely distressed. These warships were treasures to him, and they were also the foundation of his foothold. Thinking of this, he quickly turned his head and shouted to the people below, "Rob the merchant ships first. Rob the merchant ships first. Leave none of the merchants alive." Upon hearing this, the Sea King was shocked. He turned his head and pounced above the merchant ships. He stood there with the full moon in his hand and looked at He Sha with a ferocious expression. At this moment, the Sea King knew that he had to protect the merchants on the merchant ships. At this moment, He Sha wanted to silence them. Therefore, he needed a witness to prove this point. The Sea King did not expect such a change. Initially, he wanted to rob the merchant ships, but now he had to protect the merchant ship. The turn of events happened so quickly that he was caught off guard. Shark-devouring formation! Upon seeing this scene, He Sha shouted angrily in a deep voice. As soon as he finished speaking, a red mark appeared on the hulls of all the warships of the Sharkbite fleet. The black sharks in the sea suddenly surged towards the 5 merchant ships in the center, biting and ramming with all their might. Facing the underwater attack, the Sea King could not do anything even though he wanted to support them. Currently, his Mu-Te fleet was being held back by the Sharkbite fleet, and he had to keep an eye on He Sha in the sky. He could not split himself to deal with the underwater attack. Just when the Sea King was feeling anxious, an enormous fleet suddenly appeared in the distance. Looking from afar, the horizon was filled with warships, forming a line that stretched across the entire sea. The appearance of this enormous fleet made the Sea King ecstatic. This was because he knew that reinforcements had arrived. Upon seeing this, He Shah's expression froze. He did not know why this fleet had come. As the fleet approached, various ship spirits appeared above the fleet. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws at the point of battle to deter them. Such provocative behavior made He Shah feel uneasy. He felt that something was not right. Looking at the 5 merchant ships that had been bitten into pieces, He Shah made up his mind and let out a low growl. Suddenly, the attack of the sharks became even more frenzied. Under the attack of the sharks, sawdust flew everywhere. The merchant ships were in danger of sinking to the bottom of the sea at any time. At this moment, a figure suddenly leaped up from the bottom of the sea and let out a long cry. Chirp! Upon hearing the cry, the surrounding sharks began to flee uncontrollably. They no longer listened to He Shah's attack command and seemed to be in a panic. It was the divine beast that Bai Zai had tamed, Little Kuan. Relying on the suppression of the overlord of the sea bloodline, the sharks were in a frenzy. It was as if a ferocious beast had entered the school of fish. They were so frightened that they scattered in all directions. They no longer listened to He Shah's command. At this moment, Little Kuan's arrival had completely destroyed the shark addiction formation. He Shah was annoyed and terrified at the same time. He did not know what kind of force had arrived. At this moment, the players' fleet was approaching them. They were less than a nautical mile away. At this moment, He Shah had a thought. Could it be that this unknown force had taken a fancy to this batch of merchant ships? Were they planning to plunder the transport just like him? Chirp! At this moment, Little Kuan poked his head out of the water again and let out a long cry proudly. Bai Zai, who was wearing a diving suit, was sitting on his back. He smiled and rubbed Little Kuan's head. The bloodline of the sea spirit? He Shah was horrified when he saw Little Kuan's appearance. He Shah knew very well how powerful the potential of a sea beast with such a bloodline was because such a creature had the potential to inherit the position of the sea spirit when it matured. It was much more powerful than the war chamber of commerce. After all, the overlord of the sea was the well-deserved king of the sea and the top of the food chain. However, He Shah was in disbelief when he saw the figure on Little Kuan's back. This sea spirit-level creature was actually tamed. This was something that He Shah dared not imagine. Looking at Bai Zai, He Shah's expression was extremely solemn. "Friend, where are you from?" "The player clan." Bai Zai pushed down his diving goggles and said with a smile. "The player clan?" He Shah was stunned as he had never heard of this force. He then turned his head to look at the players' fleet that was attacking them from behind. After a moment of silence, he said, "How about a 50-50 split?" Bai Zai was stunned when he heard that. He then shook his head. That was because he had no say in this matter. However, He Shah felt that Bai Zai's shaking of his head was too little. Faced with this situation, He Shah couldn't help but grit his teeth. "You have 6 and I have 4. Let's finish the battle quickly and leave." Bai Zai was dumbfounded when he heard that. He subconsciously turned his head to look at the Sea King. The Sea King's face turned green. He never suspected that the player clan would betray them because of the strength of the shark bite fleet. After all, no matter how powerful the player clan was, they wouldn't be afraid. The Sea King was sure of that after being in contact with them for so long. However, there was an exception, and that was the current situation. Although He Shah had only given them 10% more, this 10% might be enough to make the player clan betray him. At this moment, the players' fleet approached. Faced with the menacing players' fleet, He Shah immediately shouted in the direction of the players' fleet. "Friends, I'm willing to share this batch of goods with you. You can take 60% and I'll only take 40%. What do you think?" The players didn't slow down at all when they heard that. The players' way of thinking was completely different from the Sea King's. Although they were here to plunder, the Sea King didn't care. Although they were here to plunder, the 10% that He Shah offered was a huge temptation. Although they were here to plunder, The players at least knew that He-Sha was nothing compared to the Sea King. After all, the Sea King was a growing leak. Why would the players abandon the Sea King for a 10% profit? Moreover, the opportunity to plunder leaks was given by the Sea King. As long as the Sea King was still around, there would be plenty of such opportunities. A 10% profit was nothing compared to it. Therefore, the players couldn't help but curse in the live chat channel when they heard that. Doesn't this idiot know that the Sea King was raised by us? I'll split the profits and destroy him. He must be out of his mind. He stole our leeks and the goods that should have belonged to us. Now he wants to split the profits? Smash his head. No one cared about what He-Sha said. The players only had one thought in mind. Destroy this force that came out of nowhere and rob the merchant ship. Therefore, under He-Sha's horrified gaze, the players' fleet crashed straight into the battle zone. With the addition of the players' forces, the Sea King no longer had to worry about the underwater threat. He raised his head and flashed a ferocious smile at He-Sha. How do you want to die? What's going on with this force? Do you know them? He-Sha asked with a gloomy expression. Maybe they don't like you. I don't know them. I don't believe it. I offered them 60% of the profits, but they still refused. They would rather exhaust their combat power to fight me. If they aren't idiots, then they must be plotting something else. He-Sha immediately said. You're right. They are really idiot. However, you can only bring this secret to the 6 paths of reincarnation. As the Sea King spoke, he waved his hand and the lunar chakram sped toward He-Sha. At the same time, he followed the lunar chakram and charged toward He-Sha. Without any worries, the Sea King just wanted to teach He-Sha a lesson and let him know what pain was. Chapter 580. With the addition of the players' fleet, the battle on the surface of the sea became extremely chaotic. However, the players had been fighting with the Mu-Te fleet for a long time and were familiar with each other. Hence, they would not attack the wrong warship. The quality of the players' warships might not be as strong as the Shark Bite fleet, but the biggest advantage of the players was that they were not afraid of death. All they had to do was to protect the Mu-Te fleet and charge forward as a meat shield. If the warship was destroyed, they would jump into the water and smash the Shark Bite fleet with their hammers. They would be rich if they could smash a part out of it. In the sky, the battle between the Sea King and He-Sha was getting more intense. Seeing the situation below, He-Sha wanted to take out the Neptune's pardon to support him several times, but he was stopped by the Sea King. This time, He-Sha was in a passive position while the Sea King had the upper hand. With the help of the player clan, the Sea King could finally unleash his full potential and unleash his abilities. Under the situation where both sides could not use the Neptune's pardon, the Sea King still had many abilities. As a descendant of the Nether Sea nation, Neptune transformation was the first step. With the Death Overlord's inheritance and the Death's Light Wheel that contained the Law of Death, the Sea King was getting fiercer as he fought. On the other hand, He-Sha's biggest advantage was the fleet of warships and the Shark Legion. In terms of one-on-one combat, he was much weaker than the Sea King, who was also in the Ghost Emperor realm. He-Sha was having a hard time dealing with the Sea King's fierce attacks. At this moment, he was panicking. The situation had changed beyond his expectations. He thought that it would be a stable raid, but he did not expect it to turn out this way. He could not retreat even if he wanted to. If he retreated now, the merchants on the merchant ships would definitely inform the Acheron Chamber of Commerce about his raid. He would be punished by the Acheron Chamber of Commerce. The reason why he chose to attack in the Kuelong Ocean back then was to clear his name. However, if he did not retreat, it would be unrealistic for him to take down the merchant ships and kill the Sea King and the others at the same time. He-Sha was caught in a dilemma. How could he not panic under such circumstances? It was equivalent to saying that he had entered a dead end. Sea King, let's discuss. How about we split this batch of goods equally? I only want 10%. He-Sha quickly said after dodging the Sea King's attack. Under such circumstances, He-Sha could only choose to retreat and drag the Sea King down with him. What 10%? Am I the kind of person you think I am? I'm loyal to the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. Don't King compare me to you. You're a filthy, ungrateful wretch. The Sea King immediately rebuked angrily. Moreover, he spoke in an extremely loud voice, so that the merchants hiding in the merchant ships could hear him. Do you know what goods are on the merchant ship? Ice Fire Stone, a Tier 6 treasure, Ice Fire Stone. With this batch of treasures, the power you belong to will rise by leaps and bounds. He-Sha persuaded again. I wouldn't even want a 10th grade treasure, let alone a 6th grade one. The Underworld Chamber of Commerce has given us so many benefits, yet you're still thinking of stealing from us. You're really a piece of trash. The Sea King immediately rejected him. He approached He-Sha again, and his fist, which was condensed with water elements, smashed toward He-Sha. Upon hearing the Sea King's words, He-Sha felt extremely gloomy. He had no choice but to bite the bullet and fight. However, the difference in strength was still there. The more they fought, the weaker He-Sha became. Gradually, He-Sha couldn't hold on any longer. He was the descendant of the Shark Bite clan. His most powerful attack method was to cooperate with the Shark School to cast spells. However, his Shark School dared not surface when facing Little Kuan, the descendant of the Overlord of the Sea, let alone cooperate with him to cast the Shark Addiction Array. Under such circumstances, He-Sha was unable to do as he wished. He wanted to descend and cooperate with the fleet to attack. However, the Sea King refused to let him descend and kept dragging him along. With the Sea God's body absorbing He-Sha's attacks and the Death's Light Wheel cooperating with his attacks, He-Sha became more and more exhausted. Finally, he was slashed by the Death's Light Wheel after his weak point was found. The death energy quickly spread throughout his body, and his skin turned grayish-black. The Sea King seized the opportunity and smashed his fist on He-Sha's head. The fist force vibrated, and the water element rippled. He-Sha spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. Sea God! While roaring, the Sea King took out the Sea God's scepter from his back and hammered it on He-Sha's chest. He-Sha was instantly enveloped by a ball formed by water element. The water ball kept shrinking and squeezing inward. He-Sha struggled with all his might as he felt the tremendous pressure coming from the surface of his body. However, he was unable to break free. The Sea King could not help but laugh. He continued to mobilize all his strength to control the water element. At the same time, the death energy in his body began to permeate into the water ball and entangle He-Sha. Under the double attack, He-Sha's expression gradually became sluggish, and his struggle became more and more powerless. At this moment, the Sea King was very excited. As long as He-Sha was dead, the battle would be over soon. He could completely destroy all of He-Sha's warships one by one. Feeling the vitality in He-Sha's body fading away, the Sea King's smile became more and more ferocious. Under his control, He-Sha had no chance of escaping. He was definitely going to die. However, the group of players who saw this scene was in an uproar. At this moment, in the live chat channel, F***CK everyone look, the Sea King is going to kill He-Sha. What? He-Sha is going to be killed? Hurry up and stop him. This is the Ghost Emperor, we have to kill him. Hurry up and fire at the Sea King. Stop him. How can Sea Leak be so cruel? F***CK, I took a look at He-Sha's status. He's really going to die. Hurry up and do it. Hurry up and stop Sea Leak. This Ghost Emperor is not negotiable. We have to kill him. I'm going to have a heart attack. Losing the Ghost Emperor is a huge loss. Looking at the dying He-Sha, the Sea King's body tensed up. He fully mobilized the death energy in his body to absorb the vitality in He-Sha's body, bringing him closer to death. At this moment, the Sea King's heart was filled with joy. However, at this moment, a beam of light suddenly emerged from the sea and hit the Sea King's body. The Sea King's body trembled, and the water ball that enveloped He Sha almost collapsed. He turned his head angrily and was shocked to find that it was the warship of the Myth Guild that fired at him. It was a mistake. At this thought, the Sea King immediately turned his head and looked at He Sha, who was controlled in the water ball again. He was about to continue activating the death energy to kill him. Bang! 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 This time, several cannonballs were fired at him. Fortunately, the Sea King reacted in time and dodged them. He turned his head again and found that it was still the warship of the player clan that was attacking him. Did he have a heart attack again? The Sea King was dumbfounded. The Sea King was very familiar with the daily crazy behavior of the players. However, this was King battlefield. How dare they attack me at this moment? Can't they be normal people? Just when the Sea King was dumbfounded and confused, several figures floated up from the warship and flew toward him. Sea Leak, don't. Stop it. He's going to die. He's really going to die. He's only one breath left, big brother. Go easy on him. At this moment, seeing He Sha's dying state, the players were anxious to death. However, the Sea King was even more confused. What the CK are you guys doing again? The Sea King scolded angrily as he looked at Gu Yu and the others who were approaching him. Sea King, quickly hand He Sha over to us. Don't kill him, Gu Yu said with a distressed expression as he glanced at He Sha's dying state. Sea King, quickly withdraw the water ball. He's going to die, Sun Chi said anxiously at the side. Are you guys crazy? He's an enemy. The Sea King was dumbfounded. Seeing that this group of idiots wanted him to release He Sha, the Sea King felt that his worldview was greatly impacted. Although he always thought that the brains of the player clan were different from ordinary people, such a bizarre request still shocked him. I'm not asking you to release him. I'm asking you to hand him over to us. We'll kill him. Gu Yu, who was afraid that He Sha would die at any moment, quickly said. You'll kill him? Do you guys have such a weird hobby? The Sea King was stunned and immediately realized that he had misunderstood. Don't care if it's a weird hobby or not. Can you let him go now? Looking at the anxious faces of Gu Yu, Lu Chai, and the others, the Sea King thought for a while and waved the water ball away. He grabbed the neck of the dying He Sha and threw him to Gu Yu. Take it! The Sea King glared at Sun Chi, who was also staring at him. Then, he turned around and flew down. Although he did not understand, the Sea King still decided to hand He Sha over to Gu Yu and the others. Otherwise, he was afraid that the player clan would go crazy and directly confront him at this critical moment. He could not afford to offend them. After receiving He Sha, Gu Yu and the others felt relieved. A Ghost Emperor-level powerhouse was of no value to the Sea King. However, to Gu Yu and the others, who could kill the target and obtain soul power and experience points as a reward, it was even more valuable than the ice and fire stones. To the great Demon King who could refine corpses, it was an artifact that could not be exchanged for any number of ice and fire stones. Now that they had He Sha, the players could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Holding the dying He Sha in his hands, Gu Yu felt as if he was holding a treasure chest full of soul coins and experience points. It was heavy and made him excited. He was in a good mood. After looking at each other, everyone's expression gradually turned ferocious. It's time to level up. Chapter 581. At this moment, the players started to dismantle the ships. At this moment, the two groups of people who were shouting and fighting became extremely harmonious. They helped each other up and started to rest. At this moment, the vice president of Shark Bite, who was hiding in the main ship, looked pale. The battle broke out again. At the same time, a large number of players' fleets attacked the merchant ships. Their participation had pinned down the Shark Bite fleet that he led. They could not support him at all, let alone plundering the merchant ships. At this moment, he clenched his teeth and said, The Sea King who was flying saw this and mobilized his spiritual power to attack his internal organs. He forcefully spat out a mouthful of blood. He only had the combat power of an advanced Ghost King. He would not stand a chance against the Sea King who could kill Black Shark. Before he could understand what was going on, Guyu suddenly threw him to Lu Chai. As for the reason, it was to inflict damage so that the experience points and soul coins would be shared equally after death. At this moment, Black Shark felt like dying. During this period, whenever Black Shark was in a critical state of near death, the players would pour a bottle of the cheapest blood recovery potion into his mouth to ensure that he would not die. With the help of the Death's Light wheel left by Mu Zhiguang, the warships could still break through the defense even though they were very tough. Although it was a little troublesome, without Black Shark, these warships were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. There was no way they could fight against the Sea King. "Brother over there, get up. Don't just lie down. I'm very sure that the arrow didn't hit you." At this moment, he suddenly felt sorry for Black Shark. After all, he was the president of the War Chamber of Commerce. Now, he had fallen into the hands of the evil player clan. Guyu took out the cheapest blood recovery potion from the channel and stuffed it into Black Shark's mouth. Compared to the Mu Te fleet, who avoided decisively and used the devices on the warships to prevent the warships from being destroyed, the player's behavior was much more ruthless. After the players from the Myth Guild touched him, Black Shark was transferred to the next warship. "Brother, wake up. It's time to clean up the mess. Hurry up and finish your work." It was fine if he was killed directly. "You do it, I do it, pass it on to the next person, continue." After observing for a while, the Sea King could not be bothered anymore. He immediately turned around and pounced on the Shark Bite fleet to destroy them one by one. At this moment, the sea merchants were dumbfounded. After all, when the Sea King and his subordinates killed the enemies, the players would not get any soul coins or experience points. However, the sea merchants did not think so. Thinking that the players were trying to silence them, they hurriedly swam towards the bottom of the sea. To complement this performance, several figures flew out of the players' warships and chased after the Sea King. The Mu Te fleet tried their best to stop the players and destroyed a few of their warships. However, there were too many of them and it was impossible to stop all of them. When the Sea King saw this, he was overwhelmed with emotions. He felt that it was really exciting to fight against the players. Although the battle against the Black Shark fleet had ended, there was still a more important thing to do. Fortunately, the Sea King chose to resist. However, the players and the Sea King would never let them go. In the outside world, the players and the Sea King's forces began to show off their acting skills. After all, when this faction went crazy, they would even kill their own people. However, in the eyes of the Sea King and his subordinates, the players' viciousness was seen as ferocious and brave. The arrival of the Sharkbite fleet gave them quite a scare. At this moment, Black Shark had become a monster of experience and soul coins, and everyone had a share. As the potion flowed down his throat, Black Shark instantly felt a warm current circulating in his body before it dissipated. Now that the Black Shark fleet had been annihilated, they felt like they were on a roller coaster with ups and downs in their hearts. After all, the number of players was huge. Up until now, the mission of everyone looting monsters had not been completed. Therefore, Black Shark was still being passed around until the end of the battle. They were all accumulating damage and waiting to get their share of the treasure. Guyu clenched his fist and punched him in the chest. Relying on the power of the high-level warships, he crushed the players and the Mu Te fleet along the way and rushed out of the encirclement. During this period, the Sea King was also secretly observing the players, wanting to know how they would deal with Black Shark. "Inform all the fleets to charge together, or else we'll be dead." Lu Chai did the same thing as Guyu. He poured the purest potion into his mouth and hit his head. However, at this moment, they heard the Sea King's angry roar. Compared to the Mu Te fleet that he led, this battle was like an assistant. Every single one of them did the same to him. The punch was neither heavy nor light, but Black Shark was a little stunned. The arrival of the follow-up reinforcements gave them hope. To be precise, there was still one person alive, and that was their president, Black Shark. After the fight, Chi Ming turned to look at Gu Yu and the others. Now that the crisis was over, they immediately walked out of the cabin to thank the Sea King. It was unbearable that the Sea King and his subordinates had cut off their leaks just like that. Another dive-in was coming. Moreover, there were no witnesses. No matter what, he would be cleared of suspicion. Even if they investigated, these merchant ships would be sunk in the Kuelong Ocean. As soon as the vice president of Black Shark finished speaking, the main ship began to sound its whistle. Then, all the Black Shark warships gathered and rushed toward the encirclement. What are you doing? Faced with such a situation, he did not dare to go out at all. There were already layers of encirclement outside. It was even more difficult to break through. When he saw this scene, he was dumbfounded. The battle lasted for half a day and finally ended. Therefore, they quickly hid in the cabin. Obviously, this roller coaster ride was not over yet. What should we do next? Death doesn't matter, but the leaks must be harvested by us. Although the Shark Bite War Chamber of Commerce was not the strongest, in their opinion, it was still superior to the Mu-Te War Chamber of Commerce in terms of strength. It was time for the performance. In the end, the players were putting an end to wastage. By ramming the ship's attack devices and spells, they bombarded the merchant ships crazily. However, he soon understood. He initially thought that he would be the winner in this battle. Did I hurt you just now? Why aren't you talking? Damn, don't tell me I really killed you. Seeing this, the players followed suit and jumped into the water. The sea merchants were completely dumbfounded. The Shark Bite fleet was annihilated. All the members were killed and all the warships were sunk. He Sha was stunned when he heard this. Although he didn't understand why they were doing this, he understood one thing. The transmission wasn't over yet. The script was to annihilate the Sea King's Mu-Te War Chamber of Commerce and take away all the Ice Fire gems. After that, Black Shark would be investigated by the Underworld Chamber of Commerce, explaining that he had nothing to do with it. The members of the Mu-Te War Chamber of Commerce felt their scalp tingle. Once again, they felt that the player clan was a force that they could not afford to offend. Look at how crazy they were. Their ships were destroyed, but they still charged at the Shark Bite fleet with their hammers. What a lunatic. There was no need to worry too much. The players were the ones who charged the most and sacrificed the most. It could be said that the player clan's existence had minimized the losses of the Mu-Te War Chamber of Commerce. At this moment, the sun had set, and the sky was filled with the afterglow. Looking at the warship wreckage floating on the Sea King smiled. Brother, stop shouting. You're too noisy. Our boss is far away. At the same time, the players who saw this scene immediately focused their attacks on the Sea King, who was flying into the sky. At this moment, the sea merchants in the merchant ship were still hiding nervously in the cabin, carefully observing the outside world. Subsequently, Black Shark was brought back to the myth warship by Gu Yu, and the guild members took turns to loot the monster. Soon, the merchant ship was destroyed, and the sea merchants chose to jump off the ship. Just when the merchants thought that they were really going to die here. With the help of the players, the Shark Bite fleet could not break through the encirclement. They were destroyed one by the Sea King. Looking at Gu Yu and the others who were grinning hideously, Black Shark felt hopeless. The intense battle was still going on, but Black Shark's transmission did not stop. He did not expect the Sea King to be stronger than him. However, the biggest variable was the arrival of the player clan. As for abandoning the warship and escaping, it was impossible. The players' warships, in particular, were charging forward fearlessly. They were not afraid of being destroyed at all, just to stop the Shark Bite fleet from breaking through the encirclement, even if it was only for a few seconds. However, they were not going after the sea merchants, but the chests of fire and ice stones that had fallen into the sea. Look, is this something that a human would do? However, in the eyes of the sea merchants, the Sea King was severely injured in order to protect them. What are we doing? Of course we're robbing them. In fact, the Sea King did not know this. Not only did he not get the resources that he wanted, but he was also going to lose his life. He had completely miscalculated. He might as well die in his own hands. At this moment, Black Shark was confused as he did not understand why Guyu wanted to save him. As members of the Acheron Chamber of Commerce, they naturally knew the difference in strength between the major chambers of commerce. Every time they saw the Mu Te fleet or the Sea King killing their enemies, the players would feel heartbroken. At this moment, his heart was filled with despair as he knew that he was done for. The Sea King's silhouette suddenly appeared from the bottom of the water. With a wave of his hand, a huge wave was generated, wrapping around the sea merchants who were still swimming crazily. He brought them up to the sky, creating a huge water column on the surface of the water. Now everyone would give themselves a blow, heal their injuries, and pass it on to the next person. What a devil! Then, it was Yi Shuer Chenziu, Wu Gui, Lu Zhan, and the others. However, what made him feel even more hopeless was yet to come. Therefore, when the Shark Bite fleet came to rob the merchant ship, they were truly terrified as they felt that something big was about to happen. It was chaos outside again, but this time, the Sea King seemed to be powerless. At the same time, the Mu Te fleet could no longer stop the players from attacking. Countless spells attacked, and a few warships collided with the merchant ship at the same time, scaring the sea merchants inside. These ice-fire stones were what they wanted. The lives of the sea merchants were worthless to the players. Although they were like cornered beasts, the destructive power of the Shark Bite fleet was still shocking. After the two groups of people exchanged pleasantries, they sat on the pile of warship wreckage floating on the surface of the sea. Looking at the sunset, they began to chat and laugh. Now, in order to be one step ahead, how could they not be ruthless? The tense atmosphere just now was instantly gone. Continue to pass it on, split it with as many people as you can. Everyone has contributed today. It's immoral for us to take the soul coins and experience points. First, it was the Sea King's strength. When the Sea King fought with him, they were even more frightened when they heard that the Black Shark wanted to pull the Sea King into their group and split the resources together. What a colossal waste! The moment they walked out of the cabin, they saw the Sea King vomiting blood and falling into the sea. After the 20 people took turns to fight him, the last 7 people raised their staffs and hit him hard on the head. Especially the descendant of the Overlord of the Sea. His existence made the sharks not dare to come out of the water, so they couldn't use their most powerful technique when fighting the Sea King. As the Sea King flew further and further away, the noisy sea gradually quietened down. Soon, the 5 merchant ships were surrounded by the players' warships. They even shared the delicacies, cigarettes, and specialty wine that they carried with them. The main reason why the players did this was not only because they were not afraid of death, but also because of the benefits. Chapter 582. After the battle, the players and the members of the Mu Te fleet began to clean up the battlefield. The wreckage of the shark-bitten battleship floating on the surface of the sea was not unrecyclable. Although the parts were damaged, they were still valuable after being smelted. Therefore, the players chose to take these things with them. Occasionally, they would pick up a complete part from the wreckage, and they would shout in excitement. After half a day of cleaning up, the players did not break their promise and handed over half of the ice-fire stones to He Sui as promised. He Sui and the other members of the Mu Te Sea Nation, who were worried that the players would take everything for themselves, saw the other side of the evil forces of the players. After that, they waved goodbye and left. After returning to Beiki, the first thing the players did was not to distribute the resources. Instead, it was to deal with Heisha. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor Powerhouse had a mental breakdown. Not only was he hammered for a day and a night, but he was also forced to drink thousands of bottles of rejuvenation potion. During this period, he vomited a few times. However, it was not something that he could not drink even if he did not want to. After all, the task of sharing the damage was not completed yet. Therefore, the players brought him back to Baki and took turns to inflict damage at the Liuli coast. Even if He Sha vomited, he still had to continue drinking. The players had no sympathy for this guy who almost killed the sea leek. Therefore, a long queue was formed at the Liuli coast in an orderly manner. When it was his turn, he went up, poured the potion, and started the hammer in one go. Then, the next one. At this moment, He Sha felt that he should just die. He really wanted to die. However, his internal injuries were so severe that it was difficult for him to even move, let alone resist. At this moment, He Sha had completely lost his dignity as the president of the War Chamber of Commerce. At this moment, he suddenly regretted it. Why didn't I smash my head into the Sea King's Death's Light Wheel? That would have been so much more satisfying. Now it was simply hell. Days like this continued for another 2 days and He Sha was completely numb. As the ruthless president of the War Chamber of Commerce, he had done many evil deeds in his life. However, for the first time, he felt that everything he had done was child's play compared to the evil forces of the players. Moreover, this torture had no purpose. That was the most terrifying part. If it was the player clan that wanted to know something, Hazel would definitely tell them everything. But to his dismay, the players didn't want to know anything at all. They were purely torturing him. His heart was filled with despair every time he saw the long queue that stretched as far as the eye could see. At this moment, he recalled what the old chief had said before he had chosen to fight for supremacy in the sea. The path you're walking on is a path of no return. No matter how high you stand, you'll definitely fall to your death. Perhaps staying here is the best choice. At this moment, he thought about how good it would have been if he hadn't chosen to fight for hegemony in the sea and stayed at the bottom of the sea as a happy Sharkbite clan. After taking medicine for 2 days and 2 nights and getting hammered, Sharkbite finally met its end. As his life force drained away, he saw the bodies of the surrounding players emitting white light. At this moment, the people who wanted to kill him looked like angels. Death was so beautiful. The president of the Chamber of Commerce had finally reached the end of his road. He had fallen just like that. His journey had been bumpy, and he had never expected it to end in such a manner. However, the fall of a powerhouse was ultimately a part of the law of survival in the underworld. If the younger generation wanted to rise, they would have to step on the corpses of their predecessors. No one was right or wrong. It was the world that was wrong. What Lu Wu wanted to do was to step on the corpses of these powerhouses and pave a path for the player clan to become a natural disaster. He wanted them to overturn the old rules and usher in a new world. Lu Wu didn't know who was right or wrong, but he knew one thing. The growth of the players was inevitably a path of bloodshed. If they wanted to succeed, they should abandon unnecessary pity. Because an expert like He Sha had attained his current position through such a method as well. His hands were stained with the blood of many clans and forces. The position of the Chamber of Commerce that he had obtained was obtained through countless robberies and bloodshed. It was just that this time, he had encountered a player force that was more evil and evil than him. After Hazel's death, the major guilds began to distribute the resources. However, it was obviously not enough to get 1 ice fire stone per person. Therefore, some guilds chose to distribute soul coins to the players who didn't get any ice fire stones. Even so, the number of ice fire stones per person was still pitifully low. In order to strengthen their equipment, Gu Yu and the others still had to spend soul coins to purchase ice fire stones from other players. After the first round of equipment strengthening, the price of ice fire stones skyrocketed after seeing the result. Of course, Lu Wu had already considered this situation. He had also thought of a solution. On the 3rd day after the robbery of the merchant ship, he released a server announcement. Server announcement. The Decomposer and Alchemist Life Profession class change officially begins. Players can register to participate in the event panel. The top 10,000 players in this event will receive the qualification letter for the class change. This announcement caused an uproar among the players. Out of curiosity about these two professions, the players began to open the event panel to check the details. Decomposer. Able to decompose items into the most basic elemental form and extract the required elements for secondary use. Alchemist. Proficient in the manipulation of elements, matching and combining them to form the required items. The two life professions released this time could be said to complement each other. Decomposer decomposes substances to obtain elements, while Alchemist uses elements to synthesize items. Lu Wu divided them into two life professions out of consideration for the players. It was mainly because these two life professions required a lot of knowledge to learn. If one did not specialize in one, it would be very difficult to improve and it would affect the development of the players. With these two life professions, the players no longer had to worry about the scarcity of many elemental items. For example, the price of the very precious level 6 precious treasures at the current stage had been rising, and there was a demand but no supply. However, the appearance of Decomposer and Alchemist was about to change this situation. For example, ice-fire stones were formed by the combination of ice element, fire element, and other rare element. Decomposer could obtain the elements that made up ice-fire stones by decomposing other substances. Then, Alchemist would combine these elements and directly create ice-fire stones. It could be said that the existence of these two life professions would make many rare items not so scarce anymore. However, it was also extremely difficult to change the profession. Moreover, regardless of whether it was Decomposer or Alchemist, the success rate was not very high. It required a long period of theoretical and practical study. However, the players did not think that there was any problem. After all, as long as it was a life profession, it was right to participate. Whether one succeeded or not was one thing, and whether one worked hard or not was another matter. War was a new society, and it was similar to reality. The acquisition of a life profession was even more so. If one did not work hard, there would never be any reward. It had nothing to do with luck. As usual, all the players who signed up received a thick stack of related knowledge books and corresponding beginner tools. The learning craze began again. Such a hardcore game, from the initial surprise to the current acceptance. The players could be said to have completely integrated into this world, and they had assumed the identity of a family of players from the land of Baki. Therefore, the learning of hardcore knowledge was also within the acceptable range. If the life profession was just a template, and learning was learned by clicking on a skill book, then changing the life profession was done by clicking on a skill book, then gathering the required materials and pressing a button to make what one wanted, it would instead make the players feel that the game had become fast food and was no longer hardcore. On the contrary, the current hardcore game gave the players a stronger sense of immersion. Although the process was painful, the satisfaction after success was incomparable to fast food games. During the learning period, the players who often traveled outside returned home. Even after the expansion of the Mansion of the Dead, it was still overcrowded. There were figures everywhere, holding books thicker than dictionaries, thinking hard and studying the contents of the book. Lu Wu felt very gratified when he saw this scene. But soon, he could not feel gratified anymore. Because the players had come up with something amazing. Since the Decomposer needed to have a good understanding of decomposing items, practice was the best learning process. Therefore, the Decomposer players began to decompose everything around them. From the little flowers and grass at the beginning, to the rocks and big trees at the back. In the eyes of the players who learned about the Decomposer, everything could be decomposed and could be reduced to its essence. They had reached the point where they wanted to decompose everything they saw, curious about what elements they could decompose. When they learned to be crazy, they even thought that the buildings in the Mansion of the Dead could be decomposed. Fortunately, Lu Wu decisively activated the building protection. As long as the players stretched their hands toward the buildings in the Mansion of the Dead, they would be notified that this item could not be decomposed. Otherwise, Lu Wu suspected that these crazy players would turn on their silly husky mode and start demolishing the house. Moreover, in order to practice, the price of low-level equipment in the auction house increased accordingly, becoming the most practical and cheap experimental products for the decomposer players. This group of players used the phrase, "Everything can be decomposed," which was marked on the first page of the Decomposer's Beginner's Handbook, to the fullest. There were even a few players who had the urge to decompose themselves to see what elements they could decompose. It was the same for the players who learned the alchemy life profession. They bought elements from the decomposer players at a low price and began to practice alchemy. The process was extremely frustrating and difficult. They started from synthesizing an ordinary rock and experienced countless failures during the process. But the moment they succeeded, they felt joy and satisfaction in their hearts. Even the rocks that could be seen everywhere were the crystallization of art in their eyes. The learning process was tough, but the players were able to find joy in the pain. They even came up with new tricks. Hobbies were always the source of learning and progress. Even if it was boring knowledge, once the players found it interesting, they would be addicted to it and start to explore. This was also what Lu Wu wanted to see. Because exploring the unknown was always the best way for the subsequent development and application of the life profession. These inherent knowledge could make the players a master in this field, but the new growth path that they developed themselves could create a new life profession. Lu Wu trained the players with this mentality. As the boss behind the scenes, he was a guide, not a dictator. Growing up with the players for 3 years, Lu Wu witnessed how they started out with white equipment and ran around the land of Beiki. Now, they were able to stand on their own and become the ruling force of the land of Beiki. During this period, they made friends with many forces and destroyed many of them. He gave them enough freedom, and the players never let him down. Step by step, Lu Wu looked forward to the day they rose to power. He looked forward to the moment when they officially became a disaster and swept across the heavenly realm. The night breeze blew gently under the dim street lights of the Mansion of the Dead. Frowning brows, the rustling sound of books being flipped, and the occasional sound of inquiry. The learning atmosphere was exceptionally strong. Chapter 583. Hearing this, Kong Yi rolled his eyes, turned to look at the little girl, and said, "Don't worry. I'm back." Seeing this person, the vicissitudes in Kong Yi's eyes faded and was replaced by fear. Now that the 5 servers were producing soul coins at the same time, the daily output of soul coins was increasing. Coupled with the soul coins in storage, they could easily cope. "Please go back. Don't worry about me." Kong Yi turned to look at the little girl helplessly. The learning atmosphere in the Mansion of the Dead was very strong. However, at that moment an accident happened again. This was because this man was his part. Chapter 584. Hearing this, Kong Yi rolled his eyes, turned to look at the little girl, and said, "Don't worry. I'm back." Seeing this person, the vicissitudes in Kong Yi's eyes faded and was replaced by fear. Now that the 5 servers were producing soul coins at the same time, the daily output of soul coins was increasing. Coupled with the soul coins in storage, they could easily cope. "Please go back. Don't worry about me." Kong Yi turned to look at the little girl helplessly. The learning atmosphere in the Mansion of the Dead was very strong. However, at that moment an accident happened again. This was because this man was his part. Chapter 585. The heavenly realm would never do that. They would never allow humans with limitless potential to come into contact with spiritual energy. "So what if I'm a primary school student? I'm eating your rice." He immediately strode towards the man who was sitting not far away, holding a magic staff and sitting under the street lamp, and asked, however, Mo Xiaoxin did not appreciate his kindness. He waved his hand in disdain. It had been 8 years. Who could understand the torment he had gone through? Kong Yi took a deep breath of the air filled with spiritual energy and walked out of the initial circle of light excitedly. He arrived at the central square of the Mansion of the Dead. After entering the game, Kong Yi was extremely excited as he felt the dense spiritual energy between heaven and earth. How about this? I'll teach you this, and you answer some of my questions. Question 3. A coachman is driving a carriage. There are 5 people in the carriage. Each person is carrying 5 bags. In each bag are 5 big cats. Each big cat is carrying 5 kittens. Each kitten is carrying 5 mice as food. How many legs are there in total? As expected, this world was not kind to primary school students. Therefore, the most likely one to create this game and secretly develop human forces was the human race. Kong Yi, start studying hard and improving every day. Hey what? Little brat, call me uncle, you're so rude. Look, this is not something a human can say. Hiss. Kong Yi slumped on his desk in frustration. This reminded him of a year ago, when he fought against the group of primary school students and destroyed a forum where people gathered to answer questions. How happy he was back then! He trembled. At this moment, he felt like a primary school student who did not know most of the questions. For Kong Yi, everything he was learning now was for the sake of cultivating as soon as possible. I can finally cultivate. It's too hard for me. The white light around him faded, and he once again appeared in the Mansion of the Dead. At this moment, Kong Yi once again felt the malice this world had towards primary school students. After a night of studying, he was woken up by his father. He ate breakfast and went to school with his backpack. When he could see clearly again, he found himself in a place shrouded in a gentle white light. Kong Yi's face was full of disdain when he heard this. After reading the questions, Kong Yi shut himself up. Full marks in middle school equals Ghost Commander graduate Kong Yi. But what made Kong Yi curious was why everyone in the square wasn't cultivating but was actually reading books. Recite it. If you don't recite it, it won't count as your answer. Mo Xiaoxin said with a smile. Who the F***ck set that? Kong Yi, who was only 1.3 meters tall, looked around and suddenly felt like a chicken standing in a flock of cranes. However, Kong Yi was once again dumbfounded when he saw the question on the test paper. Come, answer this question. How many elements can we decompose in the game world we're in? Dark element, light element, water element, fire element, wood element, spirit element. Not far from him, there was a desk and a chair with a test paper on it. Overwhelmed with emotions, he thought that he was about to start his cultivation and launch his counterattack. However, he did not expect that he would have to do questions before he started cultivating. In his shock, Kong Yi noticed that his surroundings had started to blur. Looking at this question, Kong Yi only wanted to say, I should be Xiaoming's ancestor. There's no doubt about it. Even if I, the human ancestor, become a primary school student, I will still be tortured by the world. I can't escape, I can't hide. After all, there was no way to resist, so he could only answer the question. I'm just a primary school student, aren't you just making things difficult for me? I'll let you slap me. Kong Yi roared in exasperation. If it was in the past, Kong Yi felt that he could kill 10 of him with one slap. This was too F***king scary. Of course, the originally abundant spiritual energy in the surroundings was also gone. After roaring in his heart, the indignant Kong Yi walked to the desk, sat down, and picked up a pen. You guessed it. Although he realized that this primary school student was really something, he still decided to suppress him when he saw the smug look on Kong Yi's face. He wanted to let the flower of the motherland understand that humility makes one progress, and arrogance makes one swell. You're so young, yet you're learning to brag. Is such a profound thing something you can learn? Hurry up and give me your dad's phone number, I want to talk to him. You need to be disciplined. Although he did not understand how a game could allow a soul to enter the underworld instantly, he understood one thing. Hearing the answer, Mo Xiaoxin nodded in shock, but immediately felt that something was wrong. The game notification appeared again. Amidst the torment, the time for answering questions quickly passed. Don't disturb Uncle's study, go play in the mud. 3,000 types, corresponding to 3,000 great Tao laws. Did you add the last sentence yourself? Game notification. The total score for this exam is 300 points. You have scored 300 points, full score. You have obtained 2 hours of game time, and an additional 20 minutes of game time for full score. This question was really rubbish. Pass. How could he get 2 King hours of game time without studying? From Kong Yi's point of view, the people in the game should be developing in secret and fighting for the future of humanity, but why were they studying now? These questions, which he usually disdained, had now become the biggest obstacle to his cultivation. Mo Xiaoxin. Being a primary school student was really too difficult. Full score in high school equals Ghost King graduation, but he was not the one at fault. It was this world that discriminated against primary school students. At this moment, he suddenly felt that it was useful for his biological father to force him to study every day. TSK, do I even need to study these things? I can recite them fluently even with my toes. Kong Yi, who was letting his imagination run wild, was shocked by his own thoughts. If that was really the case, then humanity was really useless. Among all the elements, how many of them are special elements that are extremely difficult to decompose? Question 1. Beer costs 2 yuan per bottle. 4 bottle caps can be exchanged for 1 bottle of beer, and 2 empty bottles can be exchanged for 1 bottle of beer. Now that you have 10 yuan in your hands, how many bottles of beer can you drink? Full score in primary school equals Ghost Soldier graduation. Question 2. Little Ming's son is my son's father, then my relationship with Little Ming is, hey, what are you looking at? Kong Yi felt that it was too difficult for him to be a primary school student. At this moment, Kong Yi urgently wanted to know the development of this game and how it appeared, so he came up with this method. Hearing the answer, Mo Xiaoxin looked at the answer in disbelief, then asked in a low voice, could it be that they were accumulating strength and had already set up a counterattack on heaven? After a brief moment of shock, Mo Xiaoxin rolled his eyes. However, the appearance of the anti-addiction test made him dumbfounded. A. I am Little Ming's grandfather B. I am Little Ming's father C. I am Little Ming's son D. I am Little Ming's grandson E. I am Little Ming. Filled with grief and indignation, Kong Yi crammed in knowledge. Wouldn't the Emperor of the Underworld step in and do something about it? Moreover, this was the Underworld, not the human world. Why was there still a set of questions for primary school students in the human world? How much this world discriminated against primary school students. During his days in school, Kong Yi also listened to the content of the teacher's lectures very seriously and even took the initiative to ask questions. Is it because the teacher assigns too little homework every day? Is that why you are so full of yourself? Mo Xiaoxin was stunned. Kong Yi's huge change in school was quickly reported to Father Kong by the homeroom teacher. In just 3 days, relying on his studies during school and cramming in the anti-addiction test bank at night, Kong Yi found that the test questions were no longer difficult for him, even if it was the kind of reading comprehension that made people confused. When he came back to his senses, he found that the primary school student was looking sideways at the contents of his book. His expression gradually became very disdainful. 36,888 types. Kong Yi replied without hesitation. As he spoke, Kong Yi suddenly stopped reciting. The veins on his forehead were throbbing, and he even had the intention to kill someone. Why did he have to do questions to play a game? After finishing 300 questions, the game notification sounded. At this moment, Kong Yi felt that the whole world was filled with malice. Emo Xiaoxin, who was thinking hard and preparing to break through to a life profession, raised his head when he heard the notification. When he saw that it was a cute child standing in front of him, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. At this moment, Kong Yi, who had obtained full marks, had tears in his eyes. His heart was filled with the pride of a primary school student. In the past, he had no motivation and had no mood to learn. Now that he was serious, many things were easy to understand. Looking at Kong Yi's angry face, Emo Xiaoxin smiled proudly. Kong Yi finally had the awareness of a primary school student. After struggling with his thoughts for a long time, the helpless Kong Yi finally clicked on the learning menu that appeared in front of him with trembling hands. Seeing that his ignorant and incompetent son's grades had improved so much, Father Kong was grinning from ear to ear. He felt that buying this gaming cabin was worth it. He should have bought it earlier. At this moment, Kong Yi thought of the 3 missing human emperors. 300 questions in exchange for 2 hours of game time? Therefore, he chose to accept the challenge again and activated the 300 random questions to clear the game. Just keep drawing. In order to get rid of this annoying primary school student, Emo Xiaoxin turned his gaze to the book, found a random question, and said helplessly, the knowledge of this world was actually not difficult for Kong Yi at all. Full marks equals Ghost Emperor graduation. The more he thought about it, the more excited Kong Yi became. He clenched his fists and suddenly felt that there was still hope for humanity. Everything was possible. However, only Kong Yi himself knew that as a primary school student, he could not escape from studying. Little brat, why are you playing games at such a young age? Study hard and avoid getting addicted to the question bank. Studying is the right path, don't go astray. He began to enter learning mode. Draw whatever you like from the book and try. Kong Yi said with an enigmatic smile on his face. Who the F***ck came up with these questions? I don't F***king know how. Why are primary school students nowadays so irritable? Emo Xiaoxin cursed in his heart. If he had studied hard back then, he would definitely have no problem dealing with these questions now. Don't ask, keep drawing. Kong Yi was in high spirits. He felt that he was really awesome, as expected of the human ancestor. Looking at the stone-faced Kong Yi, a smile suddenly appeared on Emo Xiaoxin's face. Are these questions something a human can come up with? The questions this time were different from the first time. They went smoothly. Game notification. The total score for this test is 300 points. Your score is 36 points. You have not reached the passing mark. Please continue to work hard. You have not passed this test and cannot obtain game time. As a primary school student, he only had 2 hours and 20 minutes of game time. How could he have the time to memorize the broken-down table of elements? F***ck is the cultivation method here based on academic results. Then what are these 36,888 elements called? I'm a primary school student. Don't you know that I'm going to get beaten up for drinking beer? Chapter 586. Emo Xiaoxin smiled happily as he looked at Kong Yi, who was glaring at him with clenched fists. If he didn't teach him a lesson, this primary school kid would be too full of himself. However, Emo Xiaoxin didn't plan to continue teasing him after the happy ending. Come, sit next to me. What do you want to ask? Kong Yi, who was eager to know the specific content of the game, chose to compromise and sit next to Emo Xiaoxin after some internal struggle. Seeing this, Emo Xiaoxin reached out and rubbed Kong Yi's little head, causing Kong Yi to grit his teeth. I'm the human ancestor. Patting your ancestor's head, you're really something. However, thinking of his own father who dared to spank his butt, Kong Yi was depressed. He felt that he was probably the most miserable one among the 3 remaining human ancestors. Come, ask away. Uncle is listening. Emo Xiaoxin said with a smile. Kong Yi rolled his eyes but still opened his mouth to ask. About the time the game appeared, the way humans grew in the game, and so on. Emo Xiaoxin, who frequented the forum and was also a veteran player, didn't need to think about Kong Yi's questions. He just blurted them out. Thus, one asked and the other answered. Kong Yi nodded seriously from time to time. An hour later, after understanding the way humans grew in the game, Kong Yi fell into deep thought, feeling a little excited. At this moment, he was certain that the person behind the game was definitely a member of the human race. Otherwise, how could they secretly develop the human race in this way? And he thought of a person. Perhaps only that person could do this without the Celestial Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld knowing. The human Emperor, Annihilation. This guess wasn't baseless. Kong Yi learned from his conversation with Mo Xiaoxin that players grew by plundering. And this growth method was created by Annihilation. He didn't know the specific principle, but when Annihilation led the human race to conquer the Outer Realm, it was exactly the same growth method. Declaring war everywhere and plundering resources from the Outer Realm. That group of people also grew rapidly through plundering. Kong Yi was extremely excited at the thought. If the person behind the scenes was really the human emperor, then the day when the human race would be able to sweep away the haze above their heads was just around the corner. However, he suddenly thought of a problem. Now that he was a player, would he be considered a member of the Heavenly Demon Army? Thinking about it made him a little excited. At this moment, Kong Yi was filled with fighting spirit. It turned out that he was not the only one fighting. The human race had already made preparations for war with the Heaven Realm and had been developing all this time. Thinking of this, Kong Yi smiled in relief. Although these players didn't know the truth behind the game, they would find out sooner or later. By the time the Heaven Realm realized that something was wrong and wanted to send down a heavenly punishment, the human race would already have the strength to resist. Little Wimp, speaking of which, how did you learn the breakdown manual so thoroughly? You want to become a decomposer? Mo Xiaoxin asked curiously. As he spoke, he rubbed Kong Yi's head again. Kong Yi pushed Mo Xiaoxin's hand away and said with a look of disdain, "Do I need to learn this?" He knew it the moment he was born. Although what Kong Yi said was the truth, Mo Xiaoxin felt that this child had become arrogant again. After all, when he was born, the war had not even begun. "Oh right, I'm a man of my word. Didn't you want to learn the decomposition technique? I'll teach you." At this moment, Kong Yi raised his head and looked at Mo Xiaoxin. From Kong Yi's point of view, as the ancestor of the human race, he had to keep his promise to the younger generation. Mo Xiaoxin couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. "Alright, little wimp, go and play with your classmates. I can learn such a profound problem by myself. I can really teach you. It's too easy," Kong Yi said seriously. Mo Xiaoxin couldn't help but laugh. Although Kong Yi had answered many questions, he only asked the most basic questions. Naturally, he didn't think that this little wimp would be able to thoroughly understand the principles and operating methods of a decomposer because it was simply unrealistic. After all, such profound content required extremely strong logical analysis and practical operation to understand. Putting aside the logical analysis ability of a primary school student like Kong Yi, his pocket money probably wouldn't even be enough for a single practical operation. But soon, he didn't think so. At this moment, Kong Yi took the introductory decomposer manual from his hands, flipped to the first page, and began to explain. At first, he didn't think much of it, but the more he listened, the more shocked Mo Xiaoxin became. Many concepts that were only vaguely mentioned in the books could be explained in detail by Kong Yi. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin's eyes widened. It was simply amazing. As someone who frequented the forums, he was sure that Kong Yi wasn't making things up. He really understood the content thoroughly. Looking at Kong Yi, who was still talking nonstop and looking up from time to ask if he understood, Mo Xiaoxin suddenly thought of another genius wimp. "Qiuqiu, why are all the little wimps I meet so scary?" After that, Mo Xiaoxin hurriedly listened attentively and raised his own questions from time to time. Kong Yi didn't even need to think about these questions carefully to give the answers. This shocked Mo Xiaoxin once again. An hour later, Kong Yi's expression suddenly froze. "Wait for me, it's urgent." Mo Xiaoxin, who was listening attentively, suddenly raised his head and said in shock, "What's wrong? What's the urgent matter?" "Anti-addiction," Kong Yi said angrily. As he spoke, his figure disappeared on the spot and was taken into the anti-addiction question space. More than 20 minutes later, the questions were finished. Kong Yi obtained full marks again and was released from the question space. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin was still waiting. When he saw Kong Yi appear, he couldn't help but smile mockingly. It made Kong Yi want to beat someone up. However, since Kong Yi said that he would teach him decomposition if he answered his questions, Kong Yi could only bear the grudge and teach him at the same time. Under Kong Yi's guidance, Mo Xiaoxin's understanding of decomposition kept increasing, and he was also full of confidence for the class advancement trial. As time passed, dawn broke. Kong Yi suddenly stopped teaching and said, "I'll teach you tomorrow. I'm leaving now." Mo Xiaoxin, who was carefully thinking about the knowledge Kong Yi taught, raised his head and said in shock, "What now?" "School," Kong Yi said angrily. As he spoke, his figure faded out of the game. Who could understand the helplessness of a primary school student? School, study, and homework, these three things were inescapable. That was the fate of primary school students. It was the same even when playing games. In this era, there was no such thing as using identity cards to prevent addiction. There were no loopholes to exploit. It was too difficult. That night, the physically and mentally exhausted Kong Yi returned home from school. After finishing his homework and dinner, he logged into the game again. At this time, Mo Xiaoxin was still sitting in the same place, studying with a book in his hand. When he saw Kong Yi appear, he was about to greet him when he realized that Kong Yi had suddenly disappeared. After a brief moment of surprise, he could not help but laugh. He knew that the child had gone to prevent addiction tests again. However, after studying hard, Kong Yi was already very familiar with these anti-addiction questions. He quickly finished answering them and walked out of the trial space. When he returned to the game, he saw Mo Xiaoxin smiling happily. Kong Yi was so angry. However, since he said that he would teach him, he would continue. That night, Kong Yi hurriedly finished the second half of the Decomposition Master's Beginner's Handbook before heaving a sigh of relief. And Mo Xiaoxin did not disappoint him. He was indeed very talented, understanding it as soon as he explained it. It could be said that he had learned the gist of it. Next, he needed to do it himself and practice his practical ability. However, when teaching Mo Xiaoxin, he also asked him why he wanted to learn this content. After learning from Mo Xiaoxin about the many benefits of a life class advancement, Kong Yi had an idea. Now that he was about to start cultivating other than plundering to grow, he also needed a large amount of resources for cultivation. Only then could he grow rapidly. Back then, he was the Ren Zhu. If he wanted cultivation resources, he could just ask and someone would send it to him. However, he was just a primary school student now. No one here would spoil him. If he wanted resources, he had to work hard. Therefore, when he heard Mo Xiaoxin say that as long as he succeeded in his life class advancement, he could use the things he produced to exchange for a large amount of resources, he was instantly tempted. Moreover, after the profession advancement was successful, he could also obtain precious life class tools and soul coins as reward. This made him even more determined in his idea. Since it was just a matter of moving his hands, why not? The content related to life classes might be difficult for others, but it was too easy for him. He even participated in the research on some of the principles of life classes. After thinking about it, Kong Yi opened the activity panel and accepted the profession advancement trial for Decomposition Master. After thinking about it, He opened the Profession Advancement panel for Alchemists. After realizing that there was no requirement that he could only accept one life class, he accepted the Alchemist's trial as well. After everything was settled, he no longer paid attention to Mo Xiaoxin, who was studying. He found a place to sit cross-legged and closed his eyes. The long-awaited cultivation was about to begin. Relying on the abundant spiritual energy of heaven and earth, he did not need to worry about the issue of spiritual energy. He could directly cultivate the top-notch self-created skill that was most compatible with him. As he cultivated, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered bit by bit and flowed into his body. Half an hour later, a server-wide announcement suddenly rang. Server-wide announcement. Congratulations to player Kong Yi for comprehending the top-notch skill, Mixed Elements Body. Hidden reward, 10,000 soul coins. The appearance of the wall cheat this time was no longer an uproar among the original server players. Instead, all the players in the server were in an uproar. This was the first time a wall cheat appeared in a server-wide announcement. The previous ones were all region-wide announcements, and the hidden reward was actually 10,000 soul coins. It could be said that such an achievement was unprecedented in the history of Battle Royale. From this, it could be seen how powerful the skill this player had comprehended was. It was definitely at the level of a super wall cheat. Just as the forum was buzzing with discussions about this, Mo Xiaoxin, who was holding the beginner's handbook and thinking hard, was dumbfounded. When he first heard the region-wide announcement, he felt that the name sounded so familiar. However, when he thought about it carefully, wasn't that the little brat? He turned around and saw the little brat sitting cross-legged on the ground with his hands clasped in front of his chest, looking like he was cultivating. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin was dumbfounded. In just a short while, he had comprehended a super skill that had never appeared before? I don't King believe it. This little brat must be the nephew of the boss behind Battle Royale. He must have cheated on him. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin suffered a huge blow. Were all primary school students this scary nowadays? Chapter 587. Having witnessed the birth of a wall-hacking player in such a seemingly easy way, Mo Xiaoxin suffered a huge blow. As a veteran player who had been fighting for 3 years, he knew very well how difficult it was for a wall-hacking player to be born. To Mo Xiaoxin, Kong Yi's act of sitting on the ground and closing his eyes for half an hour to cultivate a super ability was definitely cheating. He was definitely the nephew of the boss behind the battle. How infuriating! I didn't get it even after playing for 3 years, yet he got it just like that. At this moment, what made Mo Xiaoxin feel the most unbalanced was that Kong Yi was only an 8-year-old kid. However, what made him feel more balanced was that Kong Yi was only an 8-year-old kid. So what if he was awesome? Could he avoid being addicted? Could he not do homework? Could he not go to school? Mo Xiaoxin finally felt better after thinking about it. However, his gaze towards Kong Yi was still filled with naked jealousy. At this moment, Kong Yi opened his eyes. He instinctively opened the attributes menu. Kong Yi, addicted player. Gender, male. Occupation, berserker. Attributes, abilities, mixed elements body, top-level ability. Ability details. Top-level ability of the human race, created by the human ancestor Kong Yi using himself as the blueprint. Absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to refine one's body. Upon mastery, one's body will be invulnerable to all spells and can traverse the void. Ability status. Level 1, 0. 1% ability effect. All attributes plus 15, special magic immunity effect, all spell damage reduced by 20%, no upper limit, increases as the ability grows. Special active skill, mixed elements body, lasts for 20 minutes after activation, double all attributes, increases as the ability progresses. Ability cultivation method. All the soul energy obtained from killing the target monster will be converted into level experience and soul coins. cannot be used for ability cultivation. Additional spiritual materials and other treasures are required to convert spiritual energy for cultivation. Ability notes. Mixed elements body requires a lot of spiritual materials to cultivate. Please act within your means. Looking at the introduction of his ability on the character details menu. At this moment Kong Yi was stunned. It was not because the description on the menu was wrong, but because it was too King accurate. Apart from himself, he had only imparted this technique to 2 other clansmen, and both of them had died in the Battle of the Three Realms. It could be said that no one knew the details of this technique anymore. But at this moment, the effects of this skill had been analyzed and even turned into data. At this moment, Kong Yi was filled with curiosity towards the person behind the scenes. He really wanted to know who he was, or rather, whether he was the Ren Huang who had disappeared for a long time. If not, it was hard for him to imagine when such a genius had appeared in the human race. At the very least, he was certain of one thing, and that was that this genius was definitely not born after the Battle of the Three Realms. Because after the Battle of the Three Realms, the human race had gradually withered, and the energy of the world was thin. Under such circumstances, it was utterly impossible for true experts to be born. Therefore, this person must have existed before the Battle of the Three Realms. If it wasn't human sovereign Tu Mia or the other 2 human sovereigns, Kong Yi couldn't think of who it could be. But at this moment, he was very curious. Did the person behind the game know about his appearance? Logically speaking, how could the person behind the scenes who created this artifact not know that he had entered the game? Thinking of this, Kong Yi was a little puzzled as to why he didn't want to see him. Unable to understand, Kong Yi could only attribute it to the person behind the scenes having his own plans. As for himself, all he had to do was to grow in peace and become the sharpest knife in the war with the heavenly realm. Without the sense of urgency from before, knowing that someone had taken up the heavy responsibility, Kong Yi suddenly felt a sense of relief. Being a small soldier was pretty good. Just as Kong Yi and Mo Xiaoxin were thinking about their own matters, the forums of all the big servers were in an uproar. Regarding the appearance of another strong cheat in the original server, the players had different opinions and speculations. Watermelon_Taro, M. Another daddy has appeared. The cross-server battle is in the bag. Shirley_the_strongest. Where is he? All the acting is over. Why isn't he coming out to post a pretentious post? Why isn't he sharing the techniques data? I'm so angry. Slamming table. JPG Peppa_Boar. Speaking of which, do you guys remember that there was a guy called Black Tiger who also inherited a superb technique, and then he disappeared? Until now I haven't heard any news about him. I don't know where he went. See King's confused face. JPG. Farmer_3_fists. Oh yeah, the one above, I remember now. Where is that Black Tiger? He should have been a member of the cheat group. Why did he disappear after obtaining the technique? Did extreme joy turn to sorrow? Roasting_Jade_hair_ while _hugging_Chong Yi. Let's not talk about Black Tiger first. I just want to know what technique this cheat obtained. I'm so curious. Quickly post the data. Rabbit_who_loves_cola. People who don't show off are not good people. Take that Black Tiger for example. Didn't he show off halfway and then he disappeared? With this as an example, I hope this player will be careful and quickly fill in the detailed panel. Laughing emoji. The players on the forum were filled with resentment as the player named Kong Yi did not come out to show off for a long time. Meanwhile, Lu Wu, who was behind the scenes, was also looking for detailed information about Kong Yi. When Kong Yi entered the game, he had already noticed something unusual. This was because the strength of Kong Yi's soul was too strong. Compared to Qi Ming and Ao Jian, it was like the difference between a vast ocean and a puddle. Lu Wu, who was surprised, immediately checked the information of Kong Yi's soul. He was shocked to find out that this guy was actually a super powerhouse that existed before the War of the Three Realms. Moreover, he was a pillar of the human race, which meant that he was one of them. During the investigation, Lu Wu found out that after the War of the Three Realms, Kong Yi's experience was equally thrilling. He struggled in the extraterrestrial world and planned for the future. It could be said that he experienced many difficulties and obstacles before he successfully reincarnated into the human world. However, the difficulties were not over, because he became a primary school student. Although there were many ideas that he wanted to realize as a primary school student, any of Kong Yi's ideas were ignorant and incompetent in Father Kong's eyes. If he disobeyed, he would be beaten up. There was no room for negotiation. Seeing the dignified human ancestor end up like this, Lu Wu felt slightly sympathetic. This was too tragic. As for the subsequent anti-addiction, as for the soul detection that Lu Wu had set up, it was calculated after reincarnation. Therefore, even if the actual age of the soul was very old, as long as one had reincarnated through the 6 realms of reincarnation, the calculation would start from 0. This was because if it was not calculated in this way, many players' souls were reincarnated. Then, the anti-addiction system would become a decoration and would be meaningless. Thinking of this, Lu Wu once again observed 3 seconds of silence for Kong Yi. Every day, he would go to school and do his homework. The only time he returned home at night to play games, he would still have to face the anti-addiction system for a while. This was really too tragic. However, there was also a benefit to Kong Yi's anti-addiction system. That was Father Kong's peace of mind. Ever since he started playing battle, Father Kong would never disturb Kong Yi again. This was because Kong Yi's academic performance had improved rapidly. However, if there was no anti-addiction system, Kong Yi would not even want to take a look at his textbooks. This would cause Father Kong to feel that battle would not improve Kong Yi's academic performance. He would definitely send him to other classes and thus deprive him of the right to play games. Therefore, Lu Wu did not want to remove the anti-addiction system, but from Father Kong's perspective, he could not remove it. After all, in this life, Father Kong was Kong Yi's biological father. Although Lu Wu had the ability to take Kong Yi away from Father Kong, it was a little too inhumane to do so. Therefore, Kong Yi's anti-addiction system was not over yet. After having a rough understanding of Kong Yi's experience, Lu Wu was now looking at the memory fragments that were stored in Kong Yi's soul about some specific information about the heyday of the human race. As he browsed, Lu Wu suddenly saw a cluster of information marked, "The Annihilation of the Human Emperor." Looking at this cluster of information fragments, Lu Wu suddenly felt a little excited. Regarding the human emperor annihilation, he first learned about it from the evil demon god. Later on, he also learned about the strongest human from many aspects. Now that he found out that Kong Yi actually knew about this person, how could he not be excited? Therefore, Lu Wu immediately clicked on the cluster of information fragments marked by the artifact as the Annihilation of the Human Emperor. But then, he was stunned. In the image, a Pikachu was shaking its butt, twisting left and right, jumping on the spot. Lu Wu was confused. This is the Human Emperor Annihilation? Pikachu? Lu Wu's head was full of question marks, and he felt that he was shocked. Is there something wrong with Kong Yi's memory, or is there something wrong with my brain? Lu Wu, who did not believe it, exited the memory fragment marked by the artifact as the Annihilation of the Human Emperor, then clicked on it again. It was still the same lively Pikachu, twisting and turning around Lu Wu, at %% at yen *#%. What kind of deity's memory is this? Has Kong Yi's soul been modified? Thinking of this, Lu Wu's face turned solemn. Apart from himself, the only person who could modify another person's soul in the artifact was a certain lowly. Therefore, he quickly exited the artifact's space and walked to the living room. At this moment, Lil Bei Li's mouth was stuffed full. He looked at Lu Wu guiltily and said in a muffled voice, she said in a muffled voice, "What did you do to me? Did you touch Kong Yi's soul?" "You're so silly, I'm eating here. You can't wrong an innocent person." "Really? It's absolutely true." "Then why did you only block the information about the annihilation?" "Because." Lil Bailey's face turned red, and she stammered and could not continue. "Tell me why." A smile appeared on Lu Wu's face. Hearing this, Lil Bailey sighed. "There's the Holy Spirit clan in the Outland, the less you know, the better. Moreover, you've seen the information fragment of Kong Yi's soul, so you should have noticed one thing. During the Battle of the Three Realms, 2 human emperors disappeared mysteriously, and the clansmen did not know where they went." Lu Wu nodded. He had indeed noticed this. Logically speaking, even if human Emperor Xiao Yi and human Emperor Di Hong wanted to leave, they would at least inform their clansmen. It was very strange for them to leave without a word. Because they can't say that there's the Holy Spirit clan in the Outland. Their Holy Lord has the ability to sense everyone who knows about that matter. This is also the reason why I've been reluctant to tell you everything. If he finds out about your existence, you'll definitely die. This information is related to the human emperor annihilation, so it's better if you don't know about it now. Hearing this, Lu Wu was very surprised. That powerful? Lil Bailey nodded. It's more powerful than you think. He used the Holy Spirit communication technique to kill many people who knew about the truth. Then, has annihilation been killed by him? Lu Wu could not help but ask curiously. Don't ask, even if you ask, you don't know. Saying this, Lil Bailey reached into the bag of snacks, grabbed a handful, and stuffed it into her mouth. Chapter 588. On this day, the 10-day training period before the life profession exam was over. The decomposer and alchemist trial would begin in a few hours. Since the 2 professions complemented each other, Lu Wu did not set a requirement to choose only one profession. However, the players knew that learning both professions would definitely slow down the pace and cause them to be unable to change their profession. Hence, they basically focused on one profession. At this moment, the players who had gone through 10 days of training were rubbing their palms in preparation for the exam. As long as they succeeded this time, their fate in the game and even in reality would be changed. Although the profession was expensive, as long as they were not lone wolves, they would not have to worry about not having enough soul coins with the support of the big guild. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had to be strong enough to learn as they progressed in the game. Therefore, the players were eager to change their profession. The disassemblers and alchemists were a rare opportunity for the players to come up with a plan. The fire and ice stones required to strengthen their equipment were severely lacking. However, with these 2 professions and some necessary materials, they could mass-produce the fire and ice stones. The profits were unimaginable. It was definitely a profit-making industry. Even the players who were passionate about PvP were eager to learn these 2 professions. As long as they changed their profession, they would not be lacking in equipment and soul coins. They might even be able to use this opportunity to enter the ranks of high-level players. Although every player had different ideas, they all had the same desire for the profession. The competition between them was intense. Everyone was starting from scratch, and everyone had a chance. This exam was the day to verify the results of their 10 days of hard work. At this moment, the mansion of the dead was full of people. People were studying with books in their hand. Mo Xiaoxin and his mother, Mo Lanlan, who were going to participate in the decomposer trial, were chatting in a corner of the central square of the mansion of the dead. At this moment, Mo Lanlan was looking at Mo Xiaoxin, who was deep in thought with a book in his hands. My dear son, can you do it? You've been playing games for 3 years and participated in so many life profession trials. Why haven't you succeeded even once? Is it because you're not pure? Look at your mother. I'm already very outstanding. I passed on my first try and even got first place. Don't be so easy. Emo Xiaoxin rolled his eyes and put down his book. Mom, this is different. You just happened to encounter cooking, which you're good at. If you encountered a life profession like decomposer that requires strong logical analysis skills, you wouldn't be able to pass it even if you tried 100 times. So, you're just lucky. Hee, my dear son, when will you be lucky enough to meet something you're good at? Or rather, what are you good at? Emo Lanlan teased. I'm good at analysis, so I'll definitely pass the decomposer trial, Emo Xiaoxin said awkwardly. When Emo Lanlan heard this, she put on a scornful look. My dear son, I'm not trying to belittle you, but as the person who understands you the best, if you can create a lifestyle job that allows you to carry people and collect negative emotions to create items, then your dear mother believes that you'll definitely be able to pass. It won't even be a problem for you to get first place. You don't have any hope for anything else. You're just an extremely ordinary and useless ordinary person. You should recognize the reality and live a mediocre life. Don't have any unrealistic ideas. Emo Lanlan didn't hesitate to attack him with a smile. At this moment, the veins on Emo Xiaoxin's forehead throbbed. He couldn't help but roar, Dear mother, that's enough. Leave some face for your dear son. Sigh, the ancients often say that good advice is unpleasant to the ear. Now you're not even willing to listen to your dear mother's heartfelt words. As expected, maternal love is a selfless sacrifice. However, most unfilial children can't even see it. I must have spoiled you too much and caused you to become like this, Emo Lanlan said with a hint of sadness. Emo Xiaoxin felt very tired as he looked at his drama queen mother. Perhaps he was born because his mother lacked a toy at that time. Based on my mother's personality, it's very likely that's what she thought at that time, Emo Xiaoxin affirmed in his heart. Dear mother, is there anything else? If not, I'm going to study and seize the time to study. Emo Xiaoxin looked at his mother dispiritedly and said, Let's chat. You're just going in to deal with it and you'll come out soon. Did you really learn it? Do you really think you can get the decomposer profession? Are you daydreaming? Emo Lanlan looked astonished, causing Emo Xiaoxin to grit his teeth. He felt that every time he chatted with his mother, he was shortening his life. Sooner or later, he would be angered to death by his mother and die young. I'm your mother. I'm educating you for your own good. How can you look at me with that expression? You should have left me in the orphanage back then. What if I was adopted by some super rich guy? How happy would that be? You wouldn't be angered to death by you, Emo Xiaoxin said angrily. TSK, I said you're daydreaming and you really want to eat it. Super rich guy. Why don't you ask Boss Battle to adopt you as his son? Wouldn't you be invincible in the game then? Ha 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 ha. Emo Xiaoxin's heart was hurt again as he looked at his mother who was smiling beautifully. It's too hard for me. Not to mention that the entire server was filled with enemies. Even his only biological mother seemed to be sent by the enemy to anger him to death. No one in the world is friendly to me. It's too hard for me. There should be no one in the world more difficult than me, Emo Xiaoxin thought with a look of despair. However, at that moment, a certain primary school student had the same thought as Emo Xiaoxin. Today was the day of the life profession trial exam. However, Kong Yi had already memorized the content by heart. He could easily pass the exam without even needing to study the basic. Therefore, he did not bother to study at all. He spent all his time in the game training, farming monsters, and accumulating resources. On this day, Kong Yi quickly finished his homework after returning home from school. He got up and was about to enter battle to take the life profession trial exam when he was stopped by Papa Kong. Son, I'll allow you to rest today. Your results from yesterday's exam are out. The form teacher gave me a call and told me that you got the first place in the class. I'm proud of you. That's great. Papa Kong said with a gratified expression. Kong Yi was stunned when he heard that. He did not understand his father's intention. Let's go. I'll take you out to play tonight. Papa Kong reached out and rubbed Kong Yi's little head. No, I want to study. Kong Yi was about to walk towards the gaming cabin. However, he was stopped by Papa Kong again. You need to strike a balance between work and rest. I'm not an unreasonable person. Since you have such good results, just relax a little today. You don't have to study anymore. Papa Kong waved his hand and said generously. No, I want to study. Don't stop me. Kong Yi struggled in despair as he looked at the gaming cabin with a look of longing. Papa Kong was gratified to see his son become so passionate about studying. However, he still felt that it was important for a child to strike a balance between work and rest while studying. It was time for him to go out to play. Therefore, he squatted down and rubbed Kong Yi's head. No, your task today is to relax and go out to play. I know you want to play. I didn't agree to it because of your result. But this time, I'll grant you your wish. Looking at his smiling father, Kong Yi was on the verge of tears. It's too hard for me. Why is it so hard to be a primary school student? I can't even make my own decisions. There's probably no one in this world who's worse off than me.